A whole kid tries to unalive my dog, and ends up getting his mom arrested. Many years ago, I was living in a beautiful sunny southern state. I had a cute little house that was completely fenced in, 5-foot fence in front, 8-foot fence on the sides and a 10-foot chain link fence in the back. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. My office was my patio unless it was raining. My dog Sari kept me company. At a year old, she was a big girl at 120 pounds. She was generally very sweet and kind but protective. She was well trained but also had a knack for disappearing to play with her animal friends, so I kept her on a chain too if we were outside. High school kids in the area had the tendency to use the alleyway behind my house to get to and from school. Most would stop and say hi to Sari and give her attention. She loved it and I didn't mind at all. One day, I noticed that anytime Sari was alone outside, some kids would rattle the back fence, throw things at it, then scream and yell at Sari. The kids would run off before I could see who they were. In case things got worse, I bought some security cameras and brought Sari with me anytime I went inside when the kids would be around. One day, I had to grab some work from inside the house and left Sari outside just for a moment. From inside, I heard the fence rattle and then Sari yelp in pain. I rushed outside just in time to see a kid try to throw a rock at Sari, along with some of his goons. I was pissed. As I rushed over to Sari, I calmly asked them, "Did it ever occur to you to wonder why I keep my dog chained in a fenced-in yard?" Then I unhooked her. Sari ran at my back fence and climbed over it. The kids started running down the alley with Sari right behind them, barking away. I let her go about half a block, then whistled for her. She came trotting back all happy as can be. I checked her over and she was fine, so I just gave her a treat. A couple of hours later, one of the kids came back with his mother. She started screaming, "You effing beach. You had your dog attack my son. He was only having a fun time. He's just a little boy. You scared him. It was just a joke. You had no right to do that. I'm calling the police and having that dog effing shot. Blah blah blah." I literally couldn't get a word in. Then she started threatening me, so I called the police. The operator could hear her plain as day even though she was at least 40 feet from me. The police showed up in about 5 minutes with 2 cars. I guess they were in the area. All very nice guys. 2 officers come talk to me while the other 2 talk to the mom and her son. The mom never stopped screaming and cussing. I explained what happened and showed the video to the officers. I show all of Sari's vet and training paperwork. I filed a report and asked to press charges. The officers are petting Sari all the while because she's demanding attention from her new friends. The 3 of us and Sari go outside towards the other group. We're about 10 feet from them when Sari suddenly cuts in front of me to stop me and starts growling. The skin around her face went tight, making it look like a hair-covered skull. The hair on her back raises up. The mom begins screaming in terror and says, "See? That beach raised that dog to attack black people. Effing racist CNT. That dog needs to be put down." The 2 officers that were with me were African American, so no. I called back one of the officers that I had been talking to. He didn't want to come too close as Sari is showing large teeth. So I moved back towards my house. As quietly as I could, I told the officer that either the mom or kid were carrying a gun. That's why Sari started getting protective. It had happened several times before. I guess to err on the side of caution, he decided to search both mom and kid. The mom had an unregistered gun. Kid had a 6 switchblade in his back pocket. So, in addition to a charge of animal cruelty, they got nailed for carrying a concealed weapon, being in possession of a firearm while on probation, resisting arrest and a couple of other charges. The mom never stopped screaming the entire time this happened and while being driven away.
I was dancing unclothed in my living room and it led to my boyfriend and his family seeing me. I was told by my boyfriend, Nate, that I'd get the house to myself for the weekend. He said he had to go visit his parents to take care of a property-related issue. I was pretty excited to have the house to myself because I have been living with Nate since I was 19 and I miss living alone. I had this tradition of spending a lot of my weekends baking while just in my bra and undies with music and dancing. Super embarrassing to admit, but I also do silly things like pretending I'm a Victoria's model or a singer and I sing along, loudly. I mention this because this means the house is usually a mess. My dresses are all over and the music is super loud, which is obviously not okay. I hadn't done that in a long time because Nate hates loud music and he's not a fan of my cupcakes. So I decided to do it this weekend. So it's Sunday and I put on What a Feeling by One Direction and it's super loud. I'm only wearing a bra and undies, the Victoria's kind. My boyfriend used his key to open the door and I didn't hear him come in because like I said, it's loud in the house and I'm also in the kitchen living room area. Apparently he wanted to surprise me. Nate brought his mom, dad, and his sister's 2 kids, who are 12-year-old boys. They come in and there I am, frozen in a dance pose like an idiot. I quickly ran to our room, yelling sorry, wasn't expecting anyone. And was putting on clothes, when Nate comes in. He was so angry. He said I was acting like a child and that I embarrassed him. His parents wanted Nate to drop them back ASAP. Refusing to stay and his mom called me a lot of names and said the kids had seen everything and that made me feel guilty.
I asked my cheating ex-husband for his nut. My ex and I were married for 8 years. We got married at 22, I got pregnant at 30. Then I discovered he was unfaithful to a coworker while I was pregnant, so I asked for a divorce. He seemed pretty remorseful and didn't want a divorce, especially for our daughter. We share custody, and he pays support. My ex-husband is very attached to my daughter. He has the right to see her 2 times a month, but I let him see her whenever he wants, so he comes to my house about 3 or 4 times a week to see my daughter. My ex wanted us to try a relationship again, but I said no. Now, 2 years after our divorce, I want another baby. I don't have a partner, and I don't want just anyone to be the father of my baby. So, I asked my ex-husband to give me his sperm so I could get pregnant again. I clarified that he did not have to pay child support for the new child. He simply has to be a sperm donor. He accepted and said he wanted to care for the baby if I became pregnant. I told my mother about my plans, and she called me an idiot since, according to her, I was giving my ex-husband wings so that we could be together in the future. My mom told several of my family, and I've been getting many harassing messages about being an idiot. Several of my family were against the divorce, saying that anyone can make a mistake like the one my ex-husband did. Am I the villain? I just want to say I made it clear to my ex that I wouldn't get back with him. I just wanted his sperm. Likewise, if in the future he does not want to continue paying support for the new child, there would be no problem. What drug did you take once and thought nope? Never again? Meth. Did some once thinking it was coke. Spent 2 days strung out and horny as hell. Never again. Benadryl. Took around 700 to 800 milligrams like 25 or 30 pills a while ago to trip. Not a good recreational drug. It's like how people who don't do drugs imagine acid to be like. It actually vividly see things and people that weren't there. I'd see people come in the room I was in and sit next to me on the couch and I'd start having a conversation with them. Only to blink and have them disappear. I'd get up and start filling up a cup of water and bam and be back on the couch. Never having gotten up. I don't remember most of the night but my friends said I was just in a complete different world. They had some funny stories from it though apparently at one point I pulled my...
Without leaving the room you're in, what's the most illegal act you could commit in a 10-minute time frame? Well, I'm in my office cubicle. There's a Stanley knife nearby and I can easily grab that, slit the throat of the 2 girls working in front of me. The problem is, behind me there are another 2 men working behind me, but I can easily take them out as well. Just a slit of the throat from behind and they'll be dead quickly and unable to call for help. I'll probably take out the guys behind me first. Walk up behind them and as a mundane office question, point at his screen. When he looks that way I take the Stanley knife and drive it into his neck and pull it along horizontally, cutting his throat, veins and thyroid gland etc. etc. I'll quickly have a hand cupped over his mouth so he can't make a sound. Before the guy sitting opposite him, back turned on us, knows what's going on, I'll be onto him and cut his throat as well. The tables can easily fit a body underneath, so there they'll go. Next are the 2 girls. It will be trickier. I'm thinking I can call one of them to the back of the cubicle where 2 of the dead guys are. Behind the partition I'll slit her throat, let her dead body slump to the floor since by now there's no point hiding bodies anymore and make for the final one. A small girl, weak, easy. If my Stanley knife happens to break during that time, I can always go to the kitchen, it's a big room that's just connected to everything, like an open floor plan office only separated by cubicles, and grab a knife with serrated edges. A lot could go wrong, but these people are generally older and not quite fit or strong. Of course, I would never do any of this because I'm not a psycho. Lawyers of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous argument you've heard in court? Criminal lawyer here, at the start of a trial a guy with the greasiest mullet enters the room. Thin, tall, disproportionately sized limbs, tattoos all over, I swear the way he sat before the judge, the only thing that was missing was a beer in his hand and a chicken under his arm. Now, this guy chose not to have a lawyer represent him, as he's a regular and spends short periods of time in jail or doing community service pretty much every month, anyway. Real problem case, drugs, alcoholism etc., but still he comes across as a really sympathetic dude and has a really entertaining way of telling a story while keeping a straight face and not realizing how funny he is. He knows he's getting fined and a couple of hours of cutting weeds as community service to keep our Dutch streets nice and tidy, but tries to win the sympathies of the judge to decrease his sentence. This man's dog was sent to a dog shelter when they found it malnourished a couple of weeks before when they brought him in for dealing real sad, but also the reason he's standing trial. The guy got high as a kite and drunk as an Irishman on St. Patrick's and while completely drugged out of his mind decided to get his dog back from the shelter, because he really missed his girl. The judge asks him if it's correct that he broke the lock and some of the camera equipment on site of the dog shelter and he confirms. You could really tell from his passionate account of the progression of the evening that he did all this out of pure love as his dog according to him was the only thing that pulled him through all of his rough patches with his girlfriend and his drug problem. So the judge orders camera footage to be shown to confirm that it is the suspect and he confirms. On it he is seen stumbling about and wrenching one of the dog enclosures open and hugging a German Shepherd. At this point everyone is touched by seeing this guy be so emotional on the camera footage with the dog, hugging it, petting it and playing with it, and you can see the judge really get into it, as well. Anyway, so this guy continues with his story and tells about how he took the dog to his car and went home never feeling happier in his life and ends his account with the driest delivery of needless to say I was effing surprised when I woke up the next day and there was a German Shepherd in my room instead of a Staffordshire Terrier. Everyone just broke out in laughter. He didn't get what was funny. Turns out the dude stole the wrong dog. Judge sentenced him to 50 hours of community service and €3,000 or so repairs for the broken doors and camera equipment. What's the best kept secret on the internet? Save 10, Save 20, and Save 30 are premier discount codes on a surprising amount of websites. Free shipping is another popular one. Anytime on a checkout, just try one of these and 25% of the time one of them works. Don't buy anything straight away. Leave it in your cart for a week, as long as you've got as far as putting in an email address. Chances are you'll get a discount offer. Source: I worked for a company that developed this kind of stuff. The Wayback Machine and how you can recover old versions of apps, deleted news articles, posts and otherwise unreachable pages. It's the reason nothing on the internet is truly ever deleted. The job sites where you can actually get a job instead of send applications that never get read. It's the best kept secret, so I don't know where it is. This website, slugbooks.com I think, has free or extremely cheap digital college textbooks. MOOCs, massive online open course, college courses from universities everywhere that are free to enroll and participate in online.
Parents of Reddit, what are your I looked away for 1 second stories? I was round at my buddy's place. He had kids about 7 and 5. Both super nice kids, nice family. We were sitting in the garden with a beer. The eldest had a foam-covered baseball bat that he'd been hitting foam balls with. Out of nowhere, he calmly walks up behind his dad and takes a full home run swing at his head. Effing clobbers him. This bat is coated in foam but it's still wood beneath it, so it's basically mid-level assault, maybe attempted murder. Dazed, the dad turns round to defend himself, at which point the 5-year-old sees his opportunity and grabs the beer from the table and starts chugging it. Not just drinking it, full-on frat boy chugging it out of nowhere. In the 3 seconds it takes me to recover from the shock and reach across the table to stop him, the kids drank about 2/3 of the bottle. Not much for an adult, but a effing skinful for a kid weighing about 1 stone. Within about 3 seconds, we went from nice family barbecue to concussed adult, domestically abused by a psychopathic 7-year-old, and a wasted 5-year-old. Went real dark real quick.
Cops, have you ever had to arrest one of your friends? I had an acquaintance named Steve, whose mother was a fragile but sweet lady with mental disabilities, and her asshole boyfriend used this to take advantage of her, beating her and getting her hooked on heroin, then later forcing her to sell it. One day Steve walked into his mother's room to see her boyfriend choking her out because she finally decided to stand up to him. Steve flew off the handle and kicked the living poop out of him, breaking multiple bones in his body. Sadly, his own mother called our police station and pressed charges against Steve because she was afraid of her boyfriend. I knew Steve's situation but sadly had to follow the call. When we showed up to the house, we were outwardly apologetic for having to arrest him. The officer who came with me was closer to Steve and actually took the time to kick the boyfriend a few times while he laid on the floor. The last I ever heard of Steve's mother's now ex-boyfriend is that Steve burned his face with petrol and he's totally disfigured now. His mother is with another guy who's helping her start an antique shop, apparently, so smiles all around.
My transphobic sister-in-law refuses to accept my son's name change and labeled my son's Christmas stocking as he/she. My husband got pissed for my reaction. To preface, I have been with my husband Todd for 6 years. We've been trying to have kids for a while now, until I had some tests done and found out I was practically infertile. After months of a deep depression and Todd's family, especially his sister Monica, making passive-aggressive comments about my usefulness, I finally got back on my own 2 feet. My husband and I decided to adopt a child regardless of my issues, as we just wanted to welcome home a kid regardless. We fell in love with a little girl named Tamara, but after a few months of her staying at her home, we noticed something different about her. She refused to wear anything feminine, only wore boy clothes, and referred to themselves as he. Todd and I just assumed she was a tomboy or something, but one day Tamara came to us and told us there had been a mistake. She wasn't a he, and Tamara was in fact Tommy. Todd and I accepted it right away, but when we told Todd's family, they weren't as understanding. They constantly made passive-aggressive statements about Tommy faking it for attention. Monica even tried to suggest Tommy needed an exorcism. We tried to distance ourselves from them as much as possible, but it's Christmas time and Todd really wanted to go to his family's home as a family unit. Like always, Monica's hosting Christmas for the family this year and invited me and Todd to Christmas dinner. When we got ready and arrived at her house, we noticed that she hung stockings for everyone in our family, including Tommy. However, instead of it saying Tommy, it said he/she. I was livid. I lost it on her and told her that she's a nuisance in this world and if she can't handle something as simple as a name change then maybe she shouldn't have kids at all. She yelled at me and told me she was sick of having a he/she near her kids and didn't want Tommy to prey on her sons in the bathroom. I stormed out and Todd followed shortly after. Todd started yelling at me when we got home saying that I was attempting to ruin an important family tradition by refusing to come and said that I was overreacting and can't be telling his sister what she should or shouldn't do in her own home. He tried to convince me to come but I said no. Not until she removes that stocking and it doesn't look like she's going to do it. Her husband Philip, who's usually nice to me, called yesterday saying that he spoke with Todd and he'd be devastated if I caused the family to miss the event at Monica's house and ruin it not only for the adults but for the kids as well since my stepson loves spending the holidays with his cousins. Todd has been quiet and the only way we communicate is through Philip. I feel ashamed. Maybe I overreacted. Am I the a-hole? Tried to warn a girl at my gym. I tried to warn a girl at my gym that had period stains on the back of her shorts, and she went on a rant, saying that she was working out and oh my god, and trying to make fun of me in front of everyone for being weird. So I announced the entire gym that she was staining the equipment with her period blood and that she needed to wash and clean herself immediately. I have never seen her since. I know it was probably really petty, and I got a lot of shite from people for doing that, but honestly, try being humble enough to listen before making a public scene. Effing drama queens.
What is your biggest fail in the bedroom? My girlfriend is a hardcore Harry Potter fan. Or at least she used to be. I remember during the honeymoon phase of our relationship, she mentioned one of her fantasies was a Harry Potter roleplay situation where she was a professor at Hogwarts that ends up being seduced by one of her students. I didn't know what to do with that information at the time, but I thought it was funny and I never forgot about it. Less than 2 years later, I decided to bring out my inner wizard and figure out how to fulfill the fantasy my girlfriend always wanted. After completing my Harry Potter research, also known as rewatching the movies, I called my girlfriend a few days ago and encouraged her to play along and avoid asking questions when she came over that evening. That was it. No spoilers. When she showed up at my flat, I was standing in the lounge wearing a Harry Potter costume and pointing a wand at her. She laughed. I referred to my girlfriend as professor and asked her if she remembered that spell she taught me during dark arts class that paralyzed people. My girlfriend was still laughing, but she eventually nodded in response to my question. I waved my wand and shouted Petrificus Totalis. My girlfriend struggled to stop laughing, but she managed to get into character and freeze instantly, as per my spell. I literally picked up my motionless girlfriend and put her down on the couch. I proceeded to unclothe her while telling her how much I've always wanted to sleep with a mudblood and pump her full of pure seed. Not gonna lie, I cringed on the inside when I delivered that line because it sounded silly, but then again, I could tell she was into it. It was working. When I was done going down, I waved my wand between her legs and said unimpregnate. I slept with her in my wizard uniform. She forgot she was under my paralysis spell and broke character a few times when she moved her body, but at that point we were both past the point of controlling ourselves and just did whatever felt good. However, post-clarity left her with mixed feelings afterwards. My girlfriend said the fantasy was hot when it happened and she appreciated my effort, but replaying it in her head made her feel like we were acting too much like children to get ourselves off, and that was kind of giving her the ick. She never said it in so many words, but I sensed that she was low-key trying to tell me that she outgrew her Harry Potter fantasy and I was probably too late. Instead of letting it go and moving on, I revisited the topic last night, almost a week since the fantasy. I decided to ask her what I could do differently in case I wanted to surprise her with a sequel. She sighed and said I could just copy and paste what her ex did. She paused mid-sentence and looked at me like she suddenly realized she said something bad. Against my better judgment, I encouraged her to finish her sentence. She said she didn't really care about Harry Potter prior to meeting her ex, who was the OG Potter fan apparently. She said his nerdy obsession with Harry Potter was endearing. I asked how endearing. She dodged my question and said I should focus on the fact that she enjoyed the version of her fantasy I created. I asked what was her ex's version. My girlfriend said if you really want to know. Before telling me that her ex enjoyed playing the role of a Quidditch captain who ends up missing the game and losing the tournament because he was inside his wizard girlfriend. I asked if the ick she was feeling afterwards was not really the ick, but the guilt of knowing she was thinking of someone else fulfilling her fantasy instead of me. She said she was gonna go and she did. I didn't stop her. Now she's not responding to my messages or my calls. My brother moved in with me to escape our abusive parents and I think he started abusing me. I really don't know how to feel about this stuff as my parents are not reliable to talk to for things like this. I don't know if anyone will ever even read all this. I'm not sure if I was the a-hole or not. So, my and I were abused and neglected growing up. I left at 18 for college, and he lived at home. He has high-functioning autism. He is able to work, drive, cook, clean, essentially everything, and I have seen him treat friends well, so I don't think his behavior was really because of his autism. I asked my brother if he would like to live with my husband and I so that he could have a springboard for independence. I did not want him to be in that environment anymore, and he was not taking steps to leave until I asked. I felt it was my duty as a big sister to give him a healthy environment. I was nervous for him to move in, because I have had very bad experiences with the majority of important men in my life with the exception of my husband, but I wanted to connect with my brother who I was unable to as a child because we were pitted against each other for competition. My husband loves him as a little brother, and we decided to charge him only $500 out of the $1,900 for the apartment with zero utilities so that he could save. I tried to hang out with him and cook with him. He told me he needed to learn more about food, and I love cooking, so I was very happy to spend time with him. However, he would refuse to spend the time together. He'd do a little food prep, then go back to his room to watch videos, leaving me alone to cook our food until it was ready. I would ask to tag along with him to the grocery store, and he'd just say no. My husband and I only have one car that he had to use for work, and my brother knew this. He refused to even leave ice cubes for me to use. It was like he was holding them hostage. We had to borrow the car my mom let him borrow for a bit, and one day I got a novel of a text saying verbatim, "You will get your ice when every day doesn't turn into a frantic search for my work hat, and when you stop leaving garbage in my car." He never told me where to put his hat in the car, and I think I left 2 receipts in there but didn't notice as he's a delivery driver and would throw every receipt in the back sayot and not clean it. Hundreds, if not thousands of receipts. Stuff really never got better from there. I am recovering from cancer, and as my scar is on my neck, I struggle to breathe in the cold. I was also a CNA and worked long hours. I would ask him to take out the trash sometimes. I would ask him to wash his dishes and put them in the washer. I asked if he could maybe take our doggies out to the bathroom if I needed to get home late. Those were the only chores I had asked him to help contribute to the household with. One day, I came home while he was cooking. I told him I emptied half the washer and asked if he would empty his half and put his dishes in. And if he could take out the garbage. He snapped and screamed at me that he was going to kill himself and that I'm using him as a servant. That none of the dishes or trash was his and that I'm taking advantage of him? I could understand that mentality if I asked him to do lots of stuff, but those are the only two things I ever asked for. I asked him where his dirty dishes go, and he said in the sink so that I could do them. He logic-edited out that the dishes in the washer were his after that, but he then doubled down and started mocking me for asking him to contribute. Like, making a horrible voice and making fun of me. Further explanation on how he looks. He is 6 feet 4 inches. I am scared of men yelling at me or being aggressive towards me because of our dad and an abusive long-term boyfriend, both of whom he knew about. I was crying and begging my husband to walk through the door in my mind as he was doing this. He walked in 2 minutes after my brother stopped to find me crying. Later that night, my brother did apologize and hug me, but it was really scary. He would ask for my husband to come home while he was working to take him to the store, which was only a 10-minute walk away. My husband loved him like family, so he'd always stop and help. He never once walked. And yet he would be mean about me asking to simply come with him to the store. Not even out of his schedule, just along for the ride. My husband is Middle Eastern, and in his culture, it is extremely rude to have to do the chores of a younger person. My husband had to wash his dishes all the time. In his culture, it is also very rude and disgusting to spit into the kitchen sink. My husband caught him doing that once, explained, and asked him not to do it again. He did not stop, and at one point, while we were both next to the sink, he came and spat in it in front of my husband. The only thing my brother would help with was purchasing medical weed for my cancer recovery and massive amounts of CPTSD. After my medical card expired, I hadn't realized the renewal process, and getting a new card was expensive, so I asked if he could use his so that I could save a bit of money. He flipped out on me for this after a while, because sometimes I would have to wait for a paycheck to pay him back because my husband and I were paying all the utilities and also my medical bills among all the other adult bills my brother straight up did not have. His only expenses were rent and gas and food. And he made more than me. I also have some memory problems, again from the cancer, that he knew about, but it really annoyed him having to remind me to pay him. I told him that it was incredibly rude of him after all that my husband and I do for him to not help with one thing. The one thing that would minimize my PTSD symptoms. He told me something along the lines of that I was lazy, and if he didn't need to smoke every day, then I didn't either. Apparently, he wasn't saving any money while he was living with us. He was spending it on video game stuff. I think Skyrim was one of them. So he was freaking about me not paying him back quickly because he had nothing saved. It feels like he was taking advantage of our kindness. We have since thankfully moved away and live in a different state. But before we left, I had breakfast with my mom and brother, and she brought up his screaming at me for the chores so that we could discuss him not doing that with significant others. He immediately blamed me for it and said he'd obviously never do that to anyone else, and the only reason he did was because he was working up to 9 hours a day just so me could smoke weed. A normal work day? Where he got paid $5 more per hour than me. And he was working full work days before I had to ask for his help? And then he started that mocking voice again. In a restaurant. I'm just really hurt and could use validation if it's warranted because it took me 15 minutes to pry out of my mom how wrong it was of him to do that, to learn that she basically told him the same thing too. She refuses to be confrontational with him, which has always been a problem, as she would discipline me and not him. Cheater, me and your mom will make you regret that. First time posting, long time reader, short time member of Reddit. Not sure if this is pro-revenge, nuclear revenge, or nuclear ghosting, but here goes. The players are, myself, fiancé, and fiancé's mom. I thought I had met the perfect woman. We met in the last year of college. We met at a party and hit it off instantly. She was a beautiful blonde with sun-kissed skin and she could have been a model. Think Kate Upton type figure. She was kind, compassionate, sympathetic, a good listener, and had an active life with many friends. She liked my friends and it was awesome over the 3 years we knew each other and how our friend groups merged. Several of our friends began dating each other. It was some of the best times of my life. I was on for a postgrad in finance and she had a degree in contractual law. This is just to say we ended up being successful in our own rights. But I'm no slouch in the looks department either. 5'11", 190 pounds and like the gym. I wasn't a super athlete but let's just say I was built. But I was/am very shy and didn't have a lot of prior relationships prior to meeting her. The first evening we met, we were smitten. First night we talked all night. Then it went to texting/phone calls daily. Then dates weekly. Then after a year, when I started working my new job, she moved in. I loved her family and her family loved me. Mostly her mother as her father was standoffish, as he was to everyone. It was a whirlwind romance. After 2.5 blissful years of overseas vacations, hiking trips and luxury vacations I proposed to her. She said yes. I was over the moon. She was doing all the planning for the wedding. We were talking about our futures together, buying a house, children and family trips that we were going to take together and all such things like that. Then it happened. One evening after we both get home to our apartment, she is a little distant. I think I noticed it right away as we were always very affectionate towards each other. This would only happen about once a week for the first month, after proposal, then it was more frequent. I would have been none the wiser except that I used to listen to a lot of Reddit on YouTube. So, I waited and observed. These bouts of ignoring me would only last a couple of hours then she would be right back to normal. But after 6 months, wedding in a year, she was like this almost every night. Intimacy was still great. Relationship with her parents was still great, but over Thanksgiving at her parents' home in Louisville, Kentucky, we lived just north of DC, she was standoffish towards me in front of her mother. Now her mother was a very observant woman. She pulled her daughter aside to talk to her and I could hear them arguing. After some heated but muffled words they returned to the rest of the family and carried on like nothing was going on. I figured I could ask her about it later and did. She was not willing to talk about it and asked me to wait till we were home to discuss it. I agreed as I loved her deeply and thought we could work through anything. Her mother was an older version of her. Same stunning looks, just a few grays in her long thick blonde hair. This is important later. Back home I asked her about it, and she was unwilling to discuss it. When pressed on it for a week she finally confessed that a guy at her work was trying to get to know her better. She wanted to be forthcoming so she showed me her phone and as I looked through it I noticed that all the texts that would have happened during the time she was withdrawing from me were removed. There was nothing untoward in the texts, but I did go into her phone settings and turned on her locator on her phone as we shared the same phone plan, and I honestly thought it would make me see that she was not doing anything wrong. Was I wrong? That second weekend after Thanksgiving she had a company Christmas party. I had planned on going but came down with food poisoning and had to back out. She had a girlfriend pick her from our apartment as they planned on drinking a lot and had a DD for the evening. We had planned on going out all night so I told her to have a blast and I would see her in the morning. So, as I'm puking my guts out and barely able to get off the toilet for more than 30 minutes, I grabbed my phone and watched her location. First it was a restaurant, then the venue of the company party, then a bar. None of this alarmed me until I saw her phone stop in a downtown hotel. At this point I was miserable in more ways than 3. Projectile vomiting out my butt, mouth and now soul. I finally fell asleep due to sheer exhaustion at 2 a.m. At 7 a.m. I awoke and saw she was still at the hotel. At noon she finally comes home, and I am on the mend. She loves me up and I asked her about the previous night without mentioning anything about knowing her location. She talks about the restaurant, party, the bar, but then says she went to her girlfriend's house to crash for the evening. First lie. For the next 3 months she has to start working later and later 3 to 4 days a week. As I start asking her about it, she becomes more and more defensive. I talked to her mom one evening when fiancé didn't come home until late. I asked her mom about the Thanksgiving conversation and she admitted to me that she thought her daughter might be stepping out of our relationship because of how she read her body language. She also said that her daughter was being more and more distant with her in their weekly texting conversations. With all this speculation that was going on in my mind I kept it to myself. 2 weeks later at work I ended up getting a new project at my company that was going to require me to fly to the Midwest Monday through Friday for the next 5 weeks starting in 2 weeks. It came with an increase in salary and as I broke the news to my fiancée, she was delighted for me. I didn't think that she was excited for the same reasons I was. So, I went online and ordered 4 motion-activated spy cameras for my apartment. I put one in the living room/entry area, one in the kitchen, one in our bedroom and one looking down our hallway. They were very small and connected to the internet via a hidden network so they couldn't be spotted on the Wi-Fi network. I secured the cams with a password and waited. On my first week out she had girlfriends over the first 2 nights and never worked late once. The third night a guy came over. I was enraged. I'm sitting there in my hotel room screaming at the monitor and calling her every name in the book. Then they went all the way, first on the couch, then in our bed. She bent for ways for him that I didn't know were possible. What was the worst was as I was watching them get it on I called her to see how her day went. She hears her phone ringing and holds her hand up for him to stop giving it to her and answers the call. I asked why she was breathing heavily and said she was at the gym working out. As soon as the call is over she goes right back to doing the dirty. When I got home Friday evening, I ignored her and went right to bed, and early Saturday got up and went cycling. I was so upset that I didn't even realize that I biked over 50 miles from our apartment. The furthest I had biked before was 30 miles. But that day I went 105.6 miles. Getting back absolutely exhausted I showered. Then she and I went out that evening and had fun with our friends and had a lot to drink. Is it breakup intimacy when the one you're going to break up with is oblivious? I was bursting inside. Heartbreak, anger, rage, feelings of betrayal all swirled around in my heart and mind. She, who used to be so attentive, was oblivious to all this. It hurt so much because I loved her so much. I finally confided in one of our mutual friends and he told me that they all knew about it for months. I was finally told. They all felt sorry for me, but no one again said a thing to me, which is why they stopped inviting us out with them. I hadn't noticed it before, but I could look back and see that about 3 months prior they gradually invited us/me less and less. So, I figured I would try and win her back. The next weekend I planned the entire weekend as a complete weekend of spoiling her in every way. Wined and dined, pampering, massages, rubs, and talking to her about future plans and about how much I loved her. I knew I was starting to break through when after her 4th glass of wine she started to cry, and I could tell the guilt was coming up to the surface. I asked her what was wrong, but she would choke up every time she tried to speak. I then told her that if she did something in her past or was having some kind of conflict in her mind that she needed to speak to me about, I was more than willing to talk with her about it, and if forgiveness was needed then I was more than willing to forgive and move on. The only words that came out of her mouth was how much she loved me. It actually hurt to hear that from her as I now had 4 separate videos of her and the other guy in our apartment getting it on. Over the next 8 weeks of traveling to the Midwest, the trips lasted for what would be 10 weeks, I recorded over 41 hours of her having intimacy with what I found out was her coworker. She never worked late once while I was gone. I tried every weekend to be extra attentive and each week she got more and more distant. After watching this for 8 weeks I was done, so I devised a 12-step getaway plan. Gather evidence, get her out of the way in order to execute my plan. I scheduled a 2-week exclusive getaway trip for us at an all-inclusive resort Barbados. She was ecstatic. Then a week before the trip I claimed I had to back out and told her to take a friend. I knew it was over when she showed no disappointment that I couldn't go. She scheduled a coworker to go with her, terminate our apartment lease. It would expire 3 days into her trip and I was the sole signature on the lease, find a job in another town. The company I had been assisting in the Midwest had offered me a job with a slight increase in salary, find a new place to live. I got an apartment in the above said location. When she is gone, perform the following. 6. Take her to the airport, go back home and pack all her things, same day. Saturday 7. Get a new phone number /phone/email. Cancel all social media. Monday 8. Separate us completely in regard to finances. Withdrew all monies from our joint accounts and then closed them. I put all her money in an envelope and packed it in her things. Monday 9. Have the movers pack all my things up and ship it west. Monday 10. Take all her things to her mother's house 600 miles away. All my fiancée's belongings fit into the back and bed of my F-250 crew cab. Tuesday through Saturday. 11. Give her mother the evidence. 12. Start my new life. I didn't want to do anything that was illegal, so I made sure that nothing of hers was missing. It was so hard to pack all her stuff neatly away. I never cried so hard in my life. I have read so many times on Reddit about SOs saying they will never do it again when caught, but they don't stop. My hope was that she would genuinely confess so we could forgive and move on. She never did. Twice she came really close, but her secret was too hard for her to reveal. Tuesday morning, I left our apartment north of DC for the last time. It took 10 hours to get to her mom's house. What happened when I got there I was not prepared for. I arrived at her mom's house around 8 in the evening. I figured she would be surprised to see me since I was coming down unannounced. Since they lived in a gated community, I had to buzz her house from the front gate, so she was waiting for me outside when I drove up. I could tell that she had been crying when I walked up to see her. I asked her what was wrong and she hugged me, bawling that she thought her husband was cheating on her with a much younger, skinnier, and prettier woman. Dumbfounded, I just held her for what was probably 10 minutes. She soaked my right shoulder with her tears and snot. When she finally composed herself, I asked if we could go in for a talk. We went in and I asked where her husband was and she indicated that he said he was going fishing with his buddies at a remote cabin an hour away. Then she said, he hates fishing. She gave me all the indications that she had picked up on and apparently it had been going on for about a year. Lifeguard in Walrus at 2 a.m. Walmart. A few years back, I worked Walmart overnight shifts from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. And the weirdest customers always come in after midnight. It was February in northern Illinois. The temperature outside is below or around 0 degrees, basically freezing. At about 2:30 p.m., I got a call over the walkie-talkie to come up to the pharmacy. It was my buddy. He sounded super intrigued and shocked, and told me to come over immediately. You've got to see this. I went up to pharmacy and saw 2 younger guys, around college age. One was dressed in a lifeguard's outfit, tank top and shorts, complete with a thick coating of sunscreen on his nose, like his whole face was piled like a cake. The other one was dressed in a complete walrus costume, and was sliding on the floor like a walrus. I was intrigued and worried. I followed these guys from a distance through the store to make sure that they weren't going to do something stupid. Soon I realized almost all my coworkers that night were doing the same thing. There were probably 5 of us stalking them through the store. I stopped following them and went back to my department for a bit, since they weren't bothering anybody. About a half hour later, I made my way up to the front registers and asked the cashier if she had seen the lifeguard and the walrus. She said that not only did she see them, but they made a purchase. The lifeguard found some sunscreen in the clearance aisle, and the walrus got a pack of salmon from the seafood department. They paid with cash, and went on their way into the freezing cold night. What are some common forms of sexism that men face? A girl cheated on my friend and got pregnant. Before she admitting to the affair, she accused him of being careless and irresponsible, and told him he was the father. She gets an abortion, they move on. The fact becomes common knowledge among our friends and there's where the sexism begins. A few days ago I'm having a conversation with a mutual friend, a girl, and somehow this comes up. She mentions the girl, and the scandal and how my friend's long relationship ended in a catastrophe. All is fine, and then she goes on and begins a sentence with but I heard that the guy has issues getting it up, she says, and that is the reason she cheated. I am a generally laid-back guy, but this really riled me up. I asked her who told her that. Turns out it's the commonly accepted theory among the girls that he has issues getting his manhood up. Now, I am no expert on my friend's erections, so I don't wish to wager either ways, but does it really matter? When presented with admitted facts versus unsubstantiated rumor, why go with the rumor? What if my friend was the one who cheated? Would the nature of conversation among them be similar? Would she say, oh, well, I heard her twat is too loose to be enjoyable and that's why he cheated on her? If you find either one of those statements less offensive than the other, congratulations, you are a part of the problem. Victim blaming happens with men too, the only difference is we don't care enough to elevate it to the level of an issue. My homophobic parents tried to disown me. Thank God I own their house. I've known that I'm gay pretty much since middle school, but of course, I haven't been able to tell my parents that. We live in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, and my parents are hardcore Christian conservatives. I just graduated from high school, and a few months ago, they ended up catching me. I was with the only other gay person I know in my school when my mother walked into my room when I thought the door was locked. The next week was hellish. My mom couldn't look at me without crying, and my dad kept trying some conversion therapy bullshit that he got from our pastor. Eventually, though, they sat me down and told me that since I was an adult now, they couldn't just sit there and accept the life of sin that I had chosen for myself. As such, I had 3 days to move out of the house. I was heartbroken, until I remembered something my dad had told me when I was younger. See, my dad was all self-righteous about me sinning against God, but he was a pretty big sinner himself. He used to gamble all the time, and wouldn't pay off his credit card bills, so his credit score was absolute garbage. To get the house we're in now, he had put my name on some of the necessary documents. I went to the bank right after I remembered this to check it out, and they confirmed my suspicions. Technically, according to the paperwork my dad illegally put my name onto, I was the sole owner of our house. I proudly went back to my parents' house with paperwork in hand and told them it was actually them who would have to leave.
What do you think is the creepiest, most disturbing unsolved mystery ever? The Cleveland torso murder. When my grandparents were my age, there was a serial killer who chopped off the heads and appendages of 20 people and left their torsos for people to find. The famous detective Elliot Ness was on the case, and the killer taunted him by leaving 2 torsos within full view of his office. The killer was never identified, nor were the majority of the victims. The death of Rebecca Zaha has stuck with me. Zaha's body was found hanging from a balcony, with her wrists and ankles bound and hands behind her back. Her death was ruled a suicide. As if that wasn't strange enough, 2 days prior to her death, the 6-year-old son of her boyfriend fell down a staircase and died. His death was ruled an accident. What's a celebrity that everyone finds attractive except you? Any of the Kardashians? Ariana Grande. All my guy friends thinks she's so hot, but I think she looks like a kid that went overboard with spray tan. Timothy Chalamet. Looks like a sick Victorian rat boy. Hailey Bieber, I'm sorry. Pete Davidson. I get why people did him, but I'm not into the whole skinny sickly looking white guy thing. Every girl who got the fish lips injections. Ryan Gosling. He's not unattractive, I just don't understand the hype. Benedict Cumberbatch. The best thing about that dude is his voice. His appearance is decidedly ordinary.
My wife keeps throwing divorce in my face over everything, so I just agreed and left. My wife and I have been together for 5 years, married for 4. We had known each other for years prior and we have 1 kid together who is 4. I am the primary breadwinner in the house as she is a stay-at-home mom. It was her choice not to go back to work. For the last year and a half, we've been having arguments about several times a month. To be clear, I do help out with our daughter. I clean, cook, and I'm involved with both of them. The first time she said she wanted a divorce was when we got into an argument when my sister called and asked if she could stay with us for a bit as she was having relationship problems. I said she could, but my wife was not happy about that. I pointed out that her friend stayed with us a couple of months prior for 5 weeks and didn't contribute to anything around the house. There was no discussion or anything. In my perspective, her friend just showed up one day. She was a stranger to both me and my daughter. On the other hand, my sister is lovely and has a great relationship with our daughter, and I thought my wife was as well. She ended up staying with us for a week, helping out around the house, cooking, cleaning and watching our daughter when needed. I thought we both forgave each other and moved on. The fights are usually over something small and most of the time are not started by me. I have suggested therapy and counseling, but she always said she never needed it. Well, I had it last night. She picked a fight saying I was spending too much time at work and that she feels abandoned. She stated that I'm not a good father and ended her rant with I want a divorce. I stood up and told her that the only reason I work so much is that she can't stop spending our money on things we don't need or use. She refused to get a job or go to school to help out. I provide for the family, for my daughter. I'm always there for her. Important dates, functions, doctor's appointments, literally anything she needs. She refused to get help through therapy or counseling. I don't want this anymore. I'll have my lawyer send her the papers when she writes them up. I gathered my daughter's things and left with her to my sister's. It has been 2 days and she keeps calling and texting saying she is sorry, didn't mean it, wants to go to counseling and therapy, needs me, misses me, etc. I don't know what to do. I love her. She is a good mother, but I can't do this anymore. Update 1. Hello all. Unfortunately, this is not a sunshine and rainbows update. I want to point out some things that it seems were Mr. looked over. I would do everything again if I had to, including taking my daughter. I have pushed my wife to go out, find a job, get a hobby, meet new friends and do something, anything. I asked about seeing someone for help, but she would not listen or consider anything I have presented. She kept saying no or she was not the problem. My daughter is my priority. I don't fight with my wife in front of her or around her. I grew up in a bad household and I have been in the position where my dad got angry at my mom. My mom left and my dad took it out on me. I don't ever want that for her. I don't know what my wife was going to do that night. You can't force someone to get help. They have to want it. Like actually want it. If you force someone, they will go through the motions just to make it look like they changed. I'm not blameless in this, but I can't raise my daughter with her thinking this is okay behavior or this is how relationships are supposed to be like. I decided when I was young that I would never be like my dad. So after I made my post, I had a lot to think about. I decided that I had to make sure she knew how serious I was. We sat down and I flat out told her that I couldn't do this anymore. The fighting and threatening of divorce have to stop. She agreed and said she would not say it. I told her that the next time it was thrown out, it would be the last time. We agreed to go to couples therapy and it was eye-opening. Things were said, feelings were brought up, and outside professional views helped us understand each other better. After a few sessions, I thought we were doing better. She started to apply herself more. She looked and obtained a job, made some friends and got a hobby. That was until an argument started because we had plans in regards to our daughter that she overlooked and couldn't cancel the other plans she had made with some new co-workers. At what I considered the end of the argument, she said under her breath, I knew marrying you was a mistake. I looked at her and the thing I remember most is how I did not recognize the woman that was standing there. She looked different to my eyes. I didn't didn't know who the woman in front of me was. I asked her to repeat herself and she said, "I should have divorced 2 years ago." I walked away and took my daughter to the plans alone, just us two. I ended up filing for legal separation. Under the terms we both signed was something along the lines of all separated. We are still legally married and will not get involved with anyone during this time period. Finances will be separated, but bills will stay as currently split. I would still pay for insurance through work. Other things that were in it were therapy sessions that would continue both as individuals and couples. I would move in with my sister and we had shared custody of our daughter. One day when I had my daughter, I needed my wife to take her. I let her know a week before and she agreed. The morning of at 7:30, I went to drop her off at the house and noticed an unfamiliar car in the driveway. My first thought was she must have a friend or girlfriend over. I rang the doorbell out of respect and waited with my daughter. When a shirtless guy opened the door and asked who I was and what I wanted, I asked for my wife. He called her, and she came around the corner in a robe, her face going from curious to shocked, to horrified, to sad. Needless to say, in 3 months' time, when the legal separation ends, I'm filing for a decree of dissolution of marriage. My daughter is safe. She doesn't understand what's going on other than daddy and mommy are not happy with each other. As stated above, she is my priority. I guess I did do the one thing I never wanted to do. The one thing I promised myself I would never become. But I guess it couldn't be helped. I ended up just like my parents. I don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. I hope I can just show how much love I have for my daughter and raise her the best I can. What happened when the patient person finally broke? My father had infinite patience. He had 3 kids from a horrible divorce and a tough job. Basically no free time, at all. The 3 of us would have been aged roughly 14, 13, and 10 respectively. It was laundry day, and the 3 kids were on the landing folding clothes and socks. We started bickering. My brother and I starting shoving each other, playfully at first, but then with intent to injure each other. My sister started to cry, I think, or at least cry shouting at us to stop. My father was in the kitchen. Normally he'd come in, give us the crazy eyes, and calmly tell us to cut it out. For whatever reason, this time something tweaked. He barged in, lightning fast, and broke my brother and I up by tossing us a few feet in opposite directions like we were dolls. But not before making a hilarious scene by smashing a plastic bottle of Tums against the wall to get our attention. Bang! Then a hand grabs me and tosses me aside. He then berated us for not being able to get along while completing the simplest of tasks. We 3 sat there, dumbfounded, as he yelled so loudly I remember seeing a new red vein in his neck, combined with a not insignificant amount of spittle from his mouth. Then, as quickly as it happened, it was all over. He left, and the house was quiet. A few hours later he apologized, saying he was stressed out but that he wanted us to get along with each other now, so that when we were older we'd still be friends. And you know what? He was right. Getting along with your siblings, even grudgingly, when you're young more easily leads you to become friends when you're adults. Divorce lawyers of Reddit, what is the most insane way a spouse has tried to screw over the other? I work for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Mrs. went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening she found Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things and she would call to amend or update her report. My good oven mitts were glued to the wall. Or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. The most intimate attractive woman I've ever met in my life asked me to spend the night and I've realized I've been fostering an inappropriate relationship outside of my marriage. I've been working with this woman who just recently immigrated from Brazil and she is quite literally the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. We've been friendly but there's always been a level of attraction present that I'm just realizing was intimate. I wanted her and she wanted me and neither of us knew it could understand that that's what it was. Well, she may have, I didn't. Every Friday my office goes out for beers and she tagged along for the first time. She stuck next to me the entire night and I just couldn't help but notice how amazing she looks. I have never been intimately attracted to a woman before like I am her. We stayed late and both had a few more drinks than we should have. We talked and finally she asked me if I would come home and spend the night with her. Then I finally understood why I had been so interested in her. I have a wife at home. I have 2 daughters. I have a family and responsibilities to all of them and I'm here chopping it up with a woman who might be a fun intimacy escape but is nothing compared to the mother of my children and life partner. I had been letting this friendship grow. Letting this pure animalistic lust grow in the both of us. I entertained the idea, maybe if we just do it once, no one has to know and more. In that moment I told her she was very nice, but I have a partner who I can't betray. I called an Uber and went home and slept it off. Today I messed up by breaking guy code by telling the wife things she doesn't need to know. About 2 years into dating, she went through a phase of asking a lot of weird questions. I enjoyed it as it was fun to talk about D's and balls and the joys of living with them day to day. She asked if it was ever in the way or uncomfortable. Absolutely, all the time. For instance, if you sit in the mall and watch people walk around the mall on a warm day, watch for guys to take one awkward long step, that means their nuts are sticking to their leg and that long step peels them off in a similar fashion and sound as pulling open Velcro. That was almost 8 years ago. Yesterday we were at the mall and she gets absurdly excited every time she sees it, enough to make them notice a couple times and smile and wave like she thinks they're famous, and for that, I'm sorry guys, it's a hilariously awkward thing for her to be excited about, but that's why What do you think is the biggest secret being kept from mankind? That there are people in the world that are richer than the known richest people in the world. If you are that rich, you can afford to be anonymous too. I guess this isn't a secret, but humanity seems to forget quite often. There is next to no privacy in the modern age. If you're reading this, your information, search histories, shopping trends, personal connections etc. are currently being monitored and sold in the information trade. People that are secretly alive, but dead for the public life and vice versa. The next possible Earth-ending force. There's a very strong possibility that NASA and the space industry know what it is and when it will happen but won't inform the general public until it passes altogether, or, if there is absolute certainty it will occur, minutes before it happens. It is because there would be literally nothing we could do about it and they would not want to cause major havoc in our last minutes alive. That farther we look in the past the more we're guessing. The Earth swallows up so much of our history. I'm sure there are many ancient civilizations that will never be discovered because there's nothing left. Teachers, what was the worst thing a substitute teacher did while you were gone? Not a teacher but the sub made the handicapped classmate who was muscle, joint and vision complications go grab his textbook from his homeroom. He's not completely helpless but when it comes to heavy things, he needs help. Classmate's homeroom was halfway across campus and the required book consists of 5 large text volumes because they're specifically made for his poor vision. He can't wear glasses either due to complications. I offered to help because I'm usually the one that goes and grabs it for him during normal class, but the sub yelled at me saying he knows my kind and I'm just trying to get out of class. Sub told me he's not there to play games and for me to quit it before he sends me off to the principal's office. Needless to say the entire class was shocked. Classmate came back with another student from the homeroom requesting that next time the sub sends someone else to grab the books because my classmate can't carry it by himself. When my usual teacher came back we requested the sub not return because of what he said to us and did to classmate. My teacher wrote an email to the principal about it and that was the end of that.
My husband posted my birth video without my consent online and started a daddy blog, which caused me and our child to be exposed to perverts online. My husband is the most wonderful and caring person I've ever met in my life. I thought. Almost overbearingly sweet. He's always concerned with how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, how is my mental health. He's an excellent father to our 2 children as well. I had a difficult birth with my first child. My hospital experience was bad. I felt traumatized afterward. When I got pregnant with my second, I knew that barring any issues, I wanted a home birth. My husband was all for it. He's a nurse, so I felt doubly safe with him plus my midwife to support me. The midwife filmed and we also had a professional photographer taking pictures. Everything went great. It was so emotional and beautiful. I have been pretty possessive of that birth tape. I never uploaded it anywhere. After I downloaded it onto my computer, I uploaded it to a USB, deleted it from my computer, and I keep it in a little hope chest to watch when I'm feeling sentimental. It is so beautiful and important to me, and I wasn't interested in sharing it. I have several friends who put their whole birth on YouTube, but I wasn't interested in doing that. My birth didn't need to be shared with the world. It didn't need to be a teaching moment. It didn't need to exist to make others feel better. After my traumatic first birth, it was mine and I cherished it. My husband didn't feel the same way and sometimes had light arguments with me about it. He was never pushy, but several times, when I would watch it, he would comment, "This is such an excellent birth video. You are so happy and calm. I really think you should post this. Home births get such a bad rep and this could put so many women at ease." I would tell him not. "This is private. Stop pestering me about it. It's my body." He eventually dropped it and hasn't brought it up since. My husband and I have never been controlling. We don't have the passwords to each other's phones. I trust him implicitly. We both have a Reddit. But I don't know his profile. A few days ago, I was in one of my parenting subreddits, and came across a disturbing thread about birth videos getting posted non-consensually in a birth fetish subreddit. I thought to myself, that is exactly the reason I didn't want to post my birth video. The commenter posted the link to the fetish sub and I'll admit curiosity got the better of me and I went to look. I wanted to know if any of my friends' videos wound up there so that I could tell them. Well, their videos did wind up there. Every single one. The sub has several vast G drives linked to birth videos, but then I saw it. My effing birth video. I'm so effing ashamed and horrified. There is a close-up of everything down there in a effing fetish site. My baby taking his first breaths, me breastfeeding. It doesn't even cut off after the birth. It shows my baby getting weighed and held. If this is a birth fetish sub, why does it feature so much of just my child? This seems like way more than just a birth fetish thing. I reported the post and Reddit says it doesn't violate anything. Only one person knows where that tape is husband. I don't even know how to broach this subject with him. Even if he didn't submit that video straight to the fetish site, he uploaded it somewhere else where they found it, and now his actions have led to this situation. He exposed me to perverts online. He exposed our newborn infant to perverts online. Update, I went over to my mom's house. She was bewildered about why I was there. I couldn't fess up to the reason why I was so upset. I am still so embarrassed. I didn't want her to go looking for the DMN video either. I just told her something bad had happened and we needed to stay for a while. My husband called and texted over and over for hours. We haven't spent a night apart in years. I gave him no warning. I texted him once and said we were visiting my mom and would be back later, but that I needed a break. I was worried he'd call the police, but he didn't. He continued to text sporadically, pleading with me to talk with him about what was wrong. I went back over to our house the next day around the time I figured he'd be off work. I took one of my mom's old phones and used it to record our whole interaction. Turns out he called out of work because he was so distressed. He ran up to me and immediately started asking what was wrong, asking where the kids were. He was so understandably upset. Seeing him like that just made me start crying too. When I started crying, he started crying. He tried to hug me and I stepped away, which just made him more upset. It was such a mess. I was finally able to compose myself enough to ask him to watch a video on my phone. He was confused. More so when he realized it was my birth video. A few minutes in, he interrupted to ask why I was showing him. I ended the video, and 100 other birth videos in the G-file folder appeared. He still just looked confused. I exited the folder and pointed to the name of the sub I was in. He took my phone for a better look and I just started bawling and bawling. After a few minutes, he started raging about how we needed to mass report the post and call the FBI. He kept repeating, "We'll fix this. This is so sick." I tried to get his attention by asking how did they get that video, but he just kept pacing around ranting. I just started repeating over and over how did they get it, until I was screaming at the top of my lungs. He started crying and told me that he had started a daddy blog a year after our first was born. He posted about being a dad and eventually about his experience with my second pregnancy. He had posted the video on YouTube to link to his blog. He felt like there weren't enough resources out there for dads regarding pregnancy. He didn't know I didn't want it posted until a week or two after the baby was here, and I was so vehement about not posting it and getting it tucked securely away on a USB. It was up for about 10 effing months before he finally took it down. He was waiting to see if I changed my mind, and was reluctant to remove it because he'd received so many messages from thankful dads about how educational and helpful his blog was. When I told him it was over, we had another big screaming match. He went through several different emotions. Crying, wailing, begging, and finally anger. I hadn't said anything about custody arrangements, or my plans besides divorce, but he started threatening full custody and how he was going to put up a huge fight. I eventually just walked out. I consulted a lawyer about what comes next. I am moving as quickly as I possibly can. I've reported it 1,000,000 times, and I've made alternatives to try and report. I've had friends report. My other friends, with their birth videos, also posted non-consensually in there, have tried reporting. It doesn't matter. I sent the link to the FBI. They have a post up in the sub about how their previous group was removed because of child lover content. Their fetish inherently involves children. They ask that Karens please leave them alone now. They acknowledge that pedophiles lurk in their sub, yet continue to steal content with children in it for sexual purposes. I do not understand how something like this is legal. I don't know how many other dark places on the internet my video has ended up. The most special moment of my life is now just this effing smear of SHT, all because I decided to try and capture it for memory's sake. Something that was supposed to bring me unending joy now leaves me weeping. I keep looking at my sweet toddler and just breaking down. He didn't deserve this. I wish I could go back and never have recorded that video. I took my USB and effing smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces just to feel like I did something.
Am I the asshole for sleeping immediately after saying goodnight? I'm a 17-year-old high school senior, and my girlfriend, let's call her Sarah, is a 15-year-old sophomore. We met at work a little over a year ago and eventually started dating after playing games together. Ever since we started dating, we had a tradition of saying good morning and good night to each other every day. At first, I didn't mind it, but after a few months, it started to feel less special and more like a routine. I discussed this with Sarah, but we continue to do it because if I don't, her anxiety flares up, and she becomes fearful that I might leave her. I'm on the autism spectrum, so understanding social cues can be challenging for me. I'm not sure if Sarah has any particular condition, but we suspect it may be autism, anxiety, or a combination of both. She was tested for bipolar, but the results came back negative. Now, here's the issue. I recently went on a road trip for a tournament in a state 6 hours away. I let Sarah know beforehand that I wouldn't be able to respond during the tournament, but I might have made a mistake by not specifying when exactly I'd be unavailable. During the tournament, we had a packed schedule with no breaks to check our phones, including no lunch break. We had to squeeze in quick meals between rounds. When I finally finished the rounds, I checked my phone and saw 14 messages from Sarah. Some asked when I'd be done, while others were updates about her life. Her final messages were reminders not to forget about her and attempts to get my attention. By that point, I was exhausted and hungry after 11 hours of intense competition, so I didn't give a substantial response. Later, before bed, we exchanged our usual good-night messages, as we had done for months. The next morning, I woke up to Sarah demanding that I look at a meme and repeatedly asking if I was awake. I was confused and told her that if we already said goodnight, I assumed it was time to sleep. In response, she expressed that she expected me to be awake for longer. Now I'm wondering if I did something wrong. Am I the asshole? Am I the a-hole here? Let me know if you need any further context. And Sarah, I know you sometimes check my Reddit account, so feel free to share your thoughts too. I just found out at least 4 of my 5 children are not mine. My wife won't say anything. I met my wife when we were in high school and we married in college. We have 5 beautiful children together really, I consider them a total blessing regardless of what I'm about to bring up, and up until a couple of weeks ago I thought that we had the perfect marriage. We were typical high school sweethearts, we go out together, we never fight, I feel like I've done everything a loving husband should do. I am saying this not to make myself out as the perfect husband. For example, my work has always meant I work long hours and maybe haven't always been there when she needed me, but I want to stress that I've never felt our marriage was in any trouble. And never in a million years would I ever have suspected my wife of being disloyal. She's always done everything she could to support me and take care of our children. Now, my eldest daughter recently had an ancestry test done. And the results of the ancestry test strongly suggested I was not her father. She confided this to me privately, showing me the results, and I could tell she was visibly upset by this. Of course, the first thing I did was reassure her that no matter what, she's my daughter and I'll always love her unconditionally. But secondly, the two of us decided to get an official paternity test since the ancestry tests are not completely reliable. It comes back and I am indeed not her biological father. This news really broke me. I'm ashamed to say I broke down in tears in front of my daughter. The combination of finding out about my wife's infidelity and how upset I was making my daughter by how I was reacting. I really wish I had kept it in for her sake, but I didn't. Following this, I asked my other children, except my youngest, to come and see me. I wanted to know the extent of my wife's infidelity. If it was a one-off, I could maybe work past it, especially given how long ago it would be. However, I didn't want to tell my youngest, as she is still in school, a teenager, and really I didn't think it was appropriate to tell her yet. We tell the other 3 what has happened. I reassure them that I love them unconditionally and that I'll always be their dad, but that I need to know how long this has been going on. God, I can't begin to explain how touching their reaction was. They didn't care I wasn't their biological father, they were just upset at how heartbroken I was. I feel like the only thing that has kept me going these last couple of weeks is their unwavering support. So we have paternity tests for each of the 3 done. Not only are none of them my biological children, together 4 of my children have 3 different fathers. Which somehow made it worse. It's like, she wasn't just having an ongoing affair, she was having multiple? I can't explain how this make it worse, but it just does. So I confront my wife with this, expecting her to confess and beg for forgiveness. She doesn't confess. She doesn't even take it seriously. She says the tests must be flawed. All 4? How the hell am I supposed to take that seriously? I keep bringing it up and she keeps brushing it off, getting progressively more annoyed at me. When I bring it up, she will try and guilt trip me. We've been together since high school, do you seriously not trust me? And such. But how am I supposed to trust her in the face of such overwhelming evidence? My kids and I confronted their mother shortly after making this post. It really didn't go well. I think the prospect that no one believed her finally hit home, because she completely broke down and apologized profusely, but refused to explain herself, or anything that would give myself peace of mind. For the next few weeks we barely said a word to each other. I was hoping she was thinking it over, and I expected her to eventually sit me down and explain herself. I figured she was so far deep in a lie that got out of control, she needed time to think things over. Nope. I came home one evening to find she had committed sewer slide by overdosing. So I lost the love of my life, and I'll never know what mistakes she had made. I really wish I could go back in time and forget about it all. Whatever mistakes she made, I honestly wanted to work through it, and now I'm just riddled with guilt that I pressed her for an answer. The worst part of this entire ordeal was watching my kids work so hard to keep me together, after having lost their mother. Refuse to serve me because I'm black? Have fun explaining that to the police. So I'm a black dude that has lived in Japan for 16 years, but a while back, I was on a date with a Japanese girl, and we went to a club in central Tokyo. We waited for 2 hours before we finally made it to the front of the line. When I approached the bouncer, he took my ID and looked at it like it was some alien passport. Mind you, this was a long line. Most people were allowed in with a quick glance at their IDs, but the bouncer kept pointing his light first at the ID and then back at me to put on a show about how suspicious he was. I was 34 at the time, so I knew that if I didn't get in, it wasn't because of my age. Finally, he told me to get out of the line. I walked off without arguing. But, the girl I was with got really mad. She started yelling at the bouncer, trying to get him to change his mind, but it didn't work. We gave up and decided to head to another bar down the street, but as we walked there, she said something like, "I don't know why they wouldn't let you in. You were with me, and I'm Japanese." I rolled my eyes a little at that and had to hold myself back from telling her that she was missing the point. It was like she didn't care that the guy was being racist towards me, just that his racism was inconveniencing her. But, whatever. I shook it off. Then, as we kept walking, I saw another bar sign that said Japanese only. At this point, I was annoyed. They didn't even try to hide it this time. So, feeling frustrated, I called the cops. When they came, I explained what the problem was in Japanese so they would see that I wasn't just some tourist. The cop nodded as if he understood the issue, but then, in a super friendly tone, said, "Well, yeah, the sign says Japanese only, and you're not Japanese. What's the issue? Go to another club." And then he left. I stood there in utter shock for a while. The problem had completely gone over the cop's head, and my girlfriend still didn't see the issue. Japan is so inherently racist and xenophobic that they don't even know that there's a problem with this behavior. Everyone and even my girlfriend thought I was ridiculous for calling the cops, but I'm not just a foreigner, I'm as good as any other Japanese citizen. I really believe I should have been allowed in, but should I have just called it quits and gone home that day? What do you think?
What's the dumbest rule your school ever enforced? Not being allowed to wear hoodies, jackets or sweaters that lack the official school logo. Can't be standing around in groups more than 4, gang mentality. Banned all backpacks bags on campus. Students were expected to somehow carry everything they needed in hand. Locked the only boys' bathroom because someone wrote on the wall in Sharpie. It wasn't even anything rude or inappropriate either. It was just the word hi or something like that. Didn't unlock the door until one boy wet himself and parents threatened to sue.
My wife told my AP I'd rather be 80-year-old me than 20-year-old you, and it haunts me every day. My wife and I were HS sweethearts. We are both 40 and have been together for 25 years. We have 2 children together, 5 and 6. For the past 5 years, I have thought that we are together because we basically grew up together. I met my now girlfriend, 28, I know I'm 12 years older. But I met her at work. She is beautiful and attractive, and I thought she was this new change I wanted. Instead of breaking it off with my ex and do the right thing, I cheated and I got caught. My wife was so gracious about it. She didn't want us to be together anymore. This was a year ago and I left our house and rented an apartment. We have yet to start divorce, although I don't want to. Neither of us was talking about it. My girlfriend, however, is not so happy about this, and mainly because I left our big house that's originally my house to my wife and daughters. I inherited from my grandparents and it is worth a fortune right now. My girlfriend means that it is my family home, and for me, yes, it is. My family is living there. But my girlfriend meant that when we get divorced, my wife has no claim to the house. 3 weeks ago my girlfriend and I were dropping our daughters with their mother, and my girlfriend went against my wishes and started talking to my wife about the house. My wife was confused and said that the house is hers and her daughter's, and she looked at me all confused, but my girlfriend told her that it was mine. And it was time to move on. My wife then said that my girlfriend should put her nose in other people's business. Girlfriend became angry and said that my wife is a hag who is bitter because she's old. My wife smiled and said, "Is your age your only redeeming quality? Because that won't last." Then she said that she'd rather be 80 yo herself than 20 yo my girlfriend. She wasn't angry or bitter. She isn't old either. She is 40, like me. Am I so old according to my girlfriend? She's very beautiful too. I don't know what my girlfriend was thinking. I felt so ashamed and angry with myself. My girlfriend was immature and embarrassing. I have been unhappy for months now, but if I broke it off, it means that I have hurt my family for nothing. My wife called me next day and said that maybe we should start talking about divorce. I broke down crying the moment we ended the call. Now every time I see her I want to be in her arms and cry. Just thinking about 80 yo her with 80 yo me beside her. The way we envisioned ourselves every time we saw an elderly couple holding hands or kissing, and we thought this will be us too. I realized I'd rather have 80 yo her than 20 yo anyone. But I have messed that up.
My brother laid hands on my pregnant wife. My wife Amanda got pregnant recently and we were excited to share the good news with my family, but before we could do so we learned about the death of my nephew. My brother's newborn had died in a car crash from an intoxicated driver incident. He informed us about it yesterday evening while we were baby shopping. We rushed straight to his house immediately after his call to offer our condolences, purchases still in hand. On the way we picked up some booze, as we figured maybe we could all get hammered and momentarily forget the tragedy. We entered the house and found them in a really distraught state and did our best to comfort them. My sister-in-law went quiet after I pulled out the booze and said it was very insensitive of me to do that. I apologized, but a few minutes later she asked us about our other purchases. I hesitated to answer, but she had already noticed what some of the stuff in the bag was. So we told her that my wife was pregnant and Emily began to ugly cry. My brother began berating me for announcing it when they were dealing with the literal death of their child. He got into a huge verbal sparring with me that ended with a scene straight out of Rocky. I told him that we were about to announce it anyway and that I wasn't going to ruin our happiness just because they were having a bad day. My brother tried to come at me again, but I told him if he kept it up I'd send him to live with his son. He got extremely angry at this and it was my wife that had to step in between us, and a kick meant for me hit her belly. My wife and I are currently in the hospital.
Is it normal for my son to watch me undress? My son is now married and 27 years old. He still watches me even though I'm 50 years old. It started when I caught him in action. He was in his 20s, and my poor boy didn't have a girlfriend at that time. I had stepped out of the shower to my room in my undergarments, drying my hair with a towel, to wear clothes that I had laid out on the bed. I would usually close my door to the room, but I must have forgotten that particular day, and that's when I saw my son walk past the room. Through the corner of my eye I could see him taking a quick peep at me, and when I had turned my face towards the door, he wasn't there anymore. It made me laugh. The next day the very same thing happened. I had kept the door open and saw him walking by when I came out of the shower. When this happened on the third day, it confirmed that this was no coincidence. I am someone who has struggled with weight my whole life, and as a chubby woman, when he was spying on me, made me more confident about my body. This trend continued for a while, where I acted innocent and wore my clothes in front of him, and one day I decided to give him an eyeful. The next morning I stepped out of the shower naked. Judging by his look, this was something which my son hadn't anticipated. I looked towards the door and this time he was too slow, and so I caught him officially. I called his name out and instructed him to come in. He walked in scared and had his head down, and apologized. I covered my breasts with one hand, and had my crotch covered with the other. I pardoned him and told him it was okay as long as it stayed between the two of us. I uncovered myself and put hands on my hips and told him he didn't have to spy on me anymore and could just look at me whenever he wanted to. He was shocked and had his mouth open. He couldn't believe it. His eyes were fixated at my breasts. He became shy and he wanted to step out of the room, but I told him to stay put. I turned around 360, and gave him a show, and asked him about my body. He said it looked great and he claimed that I was the first woman he had seen naked, so that made my day. It felt really exciting when he saw me in my birthday suit. With time he became normalized with my body and nudity. He moved out and got married, and last week he came to visit with his wife. His wife must have gone out somewhere, and when it was just the two of us at home, he asked me when I would be taking my shower. This was my cue to get undressed, and so I did. I feel flattered every time he does that, and I feel beautiful that I still look desirable to men his age.
I slept with my nephew and I regret it. I have 5 nephews, who are all younger than me. All from my older sister, 37. We have an age gap of 22 years, because my mom and dad were in their late 40s when they had me. I wasn't planning. Now, on to the story. I'm currently on vacation with my sister, her husband and my nephews camping. I sleep in a tent with my 3 older nephews. On the left sleeps is my 9-year-old nephew. Then there is me, the 13-year-old and the 10-year-old. This story is about a 13-year-old, who we'll call Ray. Ray is a few inches taller than me, he's strong and has some anger issues, but he never hit me or anything because we're almost the same age, so we get along pretty well. The first 2 nights everything went fine, but the third night I woke up feeling like something was touching my arm. I turned around and it was Ray. I asked what's wrong? But he quickly removed his hand and closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep. I was confused, but I brushed it off, thinking I imagined it. I was wrong. The next night it happened again, and more than once. I would feel someone touching my arm, my leg, even my chest. I wear an undershirt as pajamas because I got a little sunburned on my back. Every time I got more and more scared that he would hurt me, so I made sure to move or tell him what's wrong, in order to make him stop. Each time he pretended to be asleep, but I catched him looking at me to see if I was awake. I tried to cover myself with blankets, so that he couldn't touch my legs or my chest anymore, but he touched my arm or my hand instead. Yesterday night was the 5th night here at the camping camp, and it was the worst night of my life. I was wearing a hoodie, 2 blankets, and I made sure to be as far as I could to him, right next to my 9-year-old nephew, and to face him, so I could see what he was doing. When I fell asleep, everything was normal. Then I woke up to something touching my chest. I forgot to zip on my hoodie. I moved. And so did he. I zip up my hoodie and cover myself with the blankets. My heart was racing, my nerves were tense, and I was scared. He tried to touch my hand, but again I moved. Things got quiet for a bit, but then I noticed that his blanket was moving. He was touching himself. I was disgusted and horrified at the thought that he was thinking of me. I froze and stayed still until he got up and went to the bathroom. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 3:20 a.m., so I figured I woke up around 3 a.m. I held my phone in case I needed to call help. I heard his footsteps outside the tent, so I pretended to be asleep. He tried to touch my hand again, but eventually went back to sleep. I was too scared to close my eyes, but around 4 a.m. I went back to sleep. At 8:10 a.m. I woke up. I was hot, so I took off my blanket and put them between me and Ray. He was apparently awake, because he touched my leg, which wasn't covered by the blanket anymore. I had enough. I moved, he pretended to be asleep, so I grabbed my phone and my bag and went to my sister's house, because I was tired of being scared. Now we're at the beach playing Uno all together, but I can't not think about this. Tonight I plan to ask my 9-year-old nephew to sleep with me with the excuse of the cold, so there is someone between us. If he does that again, I plan to confront him and tell my sister, because this isn't normal behavior. I don't want to tell my sister yet, maybe because a part of me hopes that it's all a misunderstanding and that he'll stop. I don't really know why I'm so scared. I just needed to tell someone this.
What is the dumbest way you've been injured? I was in a toboggan in the north of Antarctica, the track and its barriers were a bit woeful. Next thing I go off course of the track and I am heading for a group of innocent penguins. The sheer speed of the toboggan makes it lethal to anything in its path, so long story short, I, in the toboggan, brutally massacre this group of penguins. I'm talking beaks detached, flippers covered in blood and organs, and since the toboggan was going that fast it cut through the group and carried on moving forward with the remains of a penguin corpse on the front of the toboggan.
Has a child ever done something that really surprised you? My best friend's 5-year-old son stayed with me for a week. My friend and her husband went on holiday. I was pregnant at that time. One evening after bringing him back home from the park, I was panting while walking home. As soon as he got home, he disappeared into the bathroom. I could hear running water, but didn't think much of it. I thought he was washing his hands, and he takes a long time. While he was doing his thing, I went to the kitchen to warm up dinner. I saw him pull a chair to the bathroom. Obviously this wasn't normal. I followed him to the bathroom, but he asked me not to come in for 2 minutes. When he finally opened the door, he filled the bathtub with hot water, added soap for bubbles, cologne for smell. He probably didn't realize that soap had a smell too. And he'd kept the chair just outside the bathtub so I could sit and soak my feet in hot water. He said that's what Dad did when his mom was expecting his sibling. It takes away all the pain, he said. Obviously the sweetest thing a child has done.
What did you see that you definitely weren't supposed to see? When I was 11 I saw another kid SHD in a urinal, and after he was done he saw me staring at him and literally pissed his pants. I'm a teacher and was helping my student, 13-year-old boy, try and troubleshoot his Chromebook and get it working again. I always clear the cache and cookies because that usually helps, but because they are school computers you can't clear the history, As I opened up the tab to clear the cache and cookies, I see that his latest Google search was how to kiss. He knows I saw it. He looked so embarrassed. I am so glad we're wearing masks so he couldn't see me trying so hard not to laugh. Okay, non-NSFW1. I was waiting in a condo apartment lobby. I asked the concierge for the Wi-Fi password. She was not good with computers and just turned her screen to show a text file that had every important password and key code for the building. I am talking router password, boiler room key combination, package room door code, security camera server password, their concierge email login, everything. Because she didn't want to read out each letter, she let me take a picture of it.
What is something legal that you're extremely addicted to? My girlfriend has always been more privileged than me, so she never knew what it was like to be flat out broke. If she needed cash, she'd just ask her parents, but I would have to look for loose change in the couch. But things quickly changed during my senior year of high school when my friend challenged my knowledge about something I was passionate about. We each put $5 and whoever was right would walk away with 10. I needed my $5 to buy lunch at school, but I was so confident that I was blindsided by the risk of me starving for the whole day. Luckily I won, and the rush that came with it was nothing short of extraordinary. I had no idea there was an easy way to get money. I thought I would be stuck with my hand digging in the couch for the rest of my life. From then on, I'd try my luck with some other friends, and my winning streak was far better than my losing streak. I was obsessed, but I could control myself. I knew when to put my money where my mouth was, because of the things we would put money on. We would bet on who could eat a pie the fastest without using their hands, who would get a girlfriend first, and have three-legged races and predict who would win. They were usually a game of chances, but I assessed the situation and got a pretty good idea of what the outcome would be, so my chances of winning were always high. Over the years though, my way of earning cash became more advanced. Instead of playing with friends, I started playing online through an app called Kulshi, because it finally became legal in the USA. It was easier to earn money that way, because I could put as much money on whatever and whenever I wanted in order to win more money. Every day I tried my luck on different things such as which team would draft Bronny James and when GTA 6 would release. These were the more riskier ones, but I made most of my money on the easier ones, like Ozempic being prescribed for weight loss in the beginning of 2024, and Taylor Swift holding the top 10 spots on the Billboard Hot 100 with her new album. It got to the point where all the money added up and I had cash to spare. I decided to take a page out of my soon-to-be in-laws book and spoil the F out of my girlfriend. I bought her gift baskets, book series, matching sets of jewelry, and other things I knew she liked. Her smile when she received the gifts brightened my day, and that alone motivated me to continue my hobby. My life felt complete, but I was totally blindsided when my girlfriend confronted me a month later. She laid out all the gifts I got her in front of me, and asked how I could afford everything. I didn't have the balls to tell her about my hobby because she would have malfunctioned. She lived a pampered princess lifestyle, so she never had to do anything to earn money. She wouldn't have understood where I was coming from. Instead, I lied and said I was working overtime. I celebrated when she laughed it off and continued the day as usual because I thought she believed me. But the next day, I came back from work and found her packing all her clothes into her suitcase. I asked her what was happening, and in just seconds I was down on my knees begging her to not leave me. She said she knew I was a liar because I was coming home at the same time every day, so there was no way I was working overtime. She told me she was going back home to her parents because at least they trusted her. Then, she said everything was really sketchy to her, so she thought I was dealing, and that's why I couldn't tell her the truth. The final blow came when she yelled that she didn't want my gifts because they were bought with dirty money. I got back up and explained that I was going to tell her everything if she let me. She asked me if it was going to be the truth this time, and I swore that it would be. I was scared that she would judge me for my hobby, but I was more scared that she would leave me. So, I worked up the courage to show her Kulshi on my phone and explained that I was making extra money, just by making educated guesses on events I had knowledge on. She didn't say anything for a while and scrolled on the app instead. I was too nervous to even breathe because I had no idea how this would turn out. All I could do was watch her like a hawk and wait for her to make a move. But she surprised me when she made a trade on an event. There were Rotten Tomato markets, and she made an educated guess on what the score of the movie Challengers would be on the weekend of the release. She turned to face me and smiled, saying she would pay me back when she won. She then said she had seen a lot of people talking about how excited they were for the release, so she knew it would have good ratings. Even after all that, the only thing I managed to say was asking her if she was still mad at me. She said no, but I shouldn't lie to her again. After that, it became a common thing for us to use Kulshi together. She got good at it quickly, but my years of experience still made me better than her. I wasn't willing to put my money on that though, but we are going to put money on TikTok getting banned because I hate that app.
What's the saddest meal you've ever eaten? My parents never really got along as I grew up, and even as a kid I kinda knew my parents didn't love each other. One day when I was 10, my mom finally packed up and left while my dad was at work. Except she entirely gutted the house, furniture, clothes, dishes, silverware, electronics, everything, packed into the back of a U-Haul and drove off and left me. I remember crying and screaming and clinging onto her leg to not go, or at least take me with her. Anyway, I called my dad and told him what happened. He couldn't leave work early, but said he'd be home as soon as possible and to lock all the doors and windows and stay safe inside. I have no idea why, but I remembered these panini-type sandwiches my dad made all the time for me, and decided to make one for him. I think I just needed something to do. So I made him a sandwich, put it on one of the paper plates I found, as my mom had taken all the other dishes, and sat on the front stoop and waited for him. I kinda just stared at it, and ended up sitting out there for about 4 hours. When my dad got home, he was shocked to see the house gutted. I kinda just held up the plate to him and said I made this for you. And he took it, sat next to me, and ate it with me. I could tell he was trying his hardest not to cry in front of me, So I pretended not to notice him tearing up.
What's the female equivalent to a man's random stiffy? Men have morning wood, women have morning dew. The kitty throb. My coworkers grazed his hand on my lower back to gently move me out the way, and it sent a shock through me. Sometimes you just get a random zing through the kitty. Awkward as F, especially if you're sitting still. If it happens when you're walking, you can kinda just walk it off. If you're sitting, you're probably going to have to clench your legs and wiggle around a bit. Counter question: does thinking about very unattractive things really make a stiffy, especially a random one, go away? Throbbing kitty? Which is inconvenient if you are attracted to one of your coworkers. How about an embarrassing blushing face? It comes on if I find a guy good looking and you cannot control it. I used to pretend to sneeze to explain a few seconds of it, but that doesn't really work. Random kitty throbbing and butterflies when you really need to pee, super weird situation. The worrying moment of is this discharge, did I get my period or am I just randomly wet? Probably like the aroused stare with chill bumps that makes your nipples hard and you can't break it, so then people start to stare at me. That little heartbeat like pulse women feel down there sometimes. Kitty ache. I can't believe I'm the only one to say this so far, but spontaneous climax. I get those now and then, usually when I'm walking fast. I guess things are rubbing. Very awkward in public lol. That effing stupid wet spot on those chairs at school after you get up after science class every time. My fiancé wants everyone to know I'm not pure. I've been with my fiancé for 6 years and engaged for the past 8 months. About a month ago my fiancé Ryan out of nowhere said he was talking to some of his Chad coworkers, as he refers to them, and they think that I shouldn't wear a white dress. This was totally weird to me. We got into an argument about it, but he reluctantly agreed to let me wear white, even though he stated that he would not be happy about it. I did not care. 2 weeks ago I picked and paid for my dress and this caused a huge argument. Ryan again came to me very annoyed. He asked to see the dress I picked, but I said no because I wanted it to be a surprise for our wedding day. He asked me to at least tell him what color it was, and when I said white, he threw a fit. When I asked him what color he thought I'd be wearing, he told me I should wear red. Again, this was super weird to me. I asked him why I would wear red to our wedding, and he told me that brides only wear white when they are pure. For some background, Ryan and I started dating when I was 22 and he just turned 21. He was a V-card owner when we met, and I only had one other person who was my ex-boyfriend of 4 years throughout high school. This caused a lot of problems the first year of our relationship, and we almost did not continue dating because of how insecure he felt that I was not the first man he had been with. After that first year, it was never a problem again until now. He went to his mom about the dress thinking she would convince me, but she's on my side. 2 nights ago, Ryan, his mom and I stood in our living room and argued about my intimacy life being shown in a dress. His mom stated that he is no longer a V-card owner either, so maybe he should wear red too, and he burst out crying. Ryan is still stating that me wearing white would be deceiving all of the guests and that it is different for guys. This all has honestly made me question even marrying this man. I got fat and my husband now finds me gross. Like in every healthy relationship, weight gain is normal. When my husband and I got together, I was 130. After 5 years of eating together, I'm now 215. My husband has gained weight too. I went from a size small in shirts to a size XXL. My husband has been encouraging us to work out, but after a 10-hour shift, I'm exhausted. On top of that, I am enrolled in college, so when I get home I do homework for a few hours each night. So by the time I'm done with work and homework, it's about time for me to go to bed. I hardly even have time to shower and eat, much less work out. That brings us to yesterday. I noticed my husband has been turning me the other way during couples alone time. When I brought this up with him yesterday, he hesitated answering. I thought it was maybe because he doesn't like my glasses, or preferred this new position. After asking him again, my husband admitted he no longer found me attractive. He said my stomach fat was not attractive, and he didn't like how I looked anymore. He said, "Your face isn't the issue. It's your belly rolls that just dangle. I don't mind a little fluff, but it's ridiculous how you've let yourself go," and I was stunned. He tried to explain that he has been trying to get us to work out so we could both be in shape, but I was too shocked to speak. He got mad when I was upset, repeating over and over, "You know I don't lie to you," and was getting defensive. I at one point tried to leave to stay with my friend to clear my thoughts, but he blocked the door and wouldn't let me go. After crying for a while, I called my friend to tell her what was going on. My husband then got mad that I was telling my friends what he said, even though in the past he has gone to his friends during a fight. After he made me end the phone call, he got fed up with me crying and left to go on a walk. I cried so hard I threw up last night. I ended up sleeping in the spare bedroom and cried myself to sleep. I have not eaten today, and don't plan on eating for a while.
What's an unspoken universal rule all males know? 1. When you meet a certain age you must groan when either sitting or standing up, even if there is absolutely no pain whatsoever. 2. When leaving somewhere you must smack your pockets to make sure everything is there. 3. The wide step. You know what I mean. 4. When there's a choice between urinals, use the one that minimizes the chances of neighboring another occupied urinal. 5. The nod. Downwards if you don't know them. Upwards if you do. 6. You cannot call shotgun in a friend's car as he is his girlfriend or wife in the group. 7. If the hood of a car is open, you must stand in a circle around it. 8. If anything is floating in the toilet when you pee, it instantly becomes a target. 9. You must stand by your bro while he's grilling, and make comments about the level of awesome it's going to be. 10. Anytime you strap down a load, you must slap it and say, "That ain't going nowhere, trust me, just do it." 11. Anytime you use a stud finder, you must first use it on yourself and say, "Found one." 12. You can shake and you can dance, but the last drop's always gonna end up in your pants. 13. When a friend buys you a drink, you don't pay them back, you just buy the next round. 14. When you become a father, all your sneezes must be loud and violent. 15. Using the zipper on your pants slowly and carefully, or you will regret every decision that brought you to this place in life. 16. Every time you grab the tongs, click them twice to make sure they work. 17. You must let out a sigh of satisfaction when sitting down on a lawn chair. 18. One shall slap the bag of soil in the garden center when passing by. 19. Never turn your homie into a clown just to make a girl laugh, that's just the worst. 20. Borrow a car, bring it back with more gas than you start with. 21. Always bring the groceries into the house in one trip. There are no exceptions. 22. You must rip off icicles from roofs and throw big rocks in lakes whenever given the opportunity. 23. Any object carried by another male is immediately assessed for its weapon capabilities. The ocular pat down. 24. Don't date a brother's ex-girlfriend. 25. When you're bald and I'm bald, we're automatically bald brothers. 26. When driving a manual vehicle, always ferociously wiggle the gear lever to make sure it's in neutral before starting the engine. Twice. Today I messed up by getting catfished but still following through with my intentions. I, 19 male, started talking to this girl, 19 female, one night after she messaged me through social media. We began talking about common interests with subtle flirting here and there. The following day I, not knowing what she looked like, asked her to send a photo of herself. She proceeded to send 4 pictures, 2 of which she was in baggy clothing, the other 2 being top angles. All of these photos had 2 things in common, all had filters, and all hid what everything below her neck looked like. After talking for a little while, our conversation shifted to a more intimate context, sparing the whole conversation for discretion reasons. The important part is that we had planned for her to sneak over while my parents were out of my house the next day. Well, the next day rolls around and we talk about her coming over, which she later does. After waiting an hour for her bus to get to my house, I wait outside so she knows which house was mine. Here is where this story goes downhill. As she walks to my driveway, I notice something about her. Not only was she hiding her body, she was also very unattractive in person. To put the cherry on top of the cake, she smelled like a mix of body odor and cigarettes. Me, not wanting to be rude as she had just traveled across town to do the devil's tango, walked her into my house and to my room. We put on a show on Netflix and began following through with what we had previously talked about. After finishing up what was and will be my worst intimate experience ever, we both just sat there. I sat there thinking about how I could get her out of my house without being rude. I finished a glass of water and said I was going to go fill it. I quickly pulled out my phone and bribed my sister, 20 female, to come knock on my door and tell me my parents were home early and that they needed me to help them unload groceries. I told her I was sorry and that I needed to go help. I told her to take the next bus, which was 20 minutes later. To my surprise, my parents did come home early as my mother had suffered an injury hiking, giving me the perfect excuse as to why she had to leave. For the next 2 hours I sat there smelling like her with my family, regretting everything I'd just done. This inspired to go deep clean my room and bathroom to keep my mind off of what happened. As I sit here writing this, 2 questions linger in my mind. Why didn't I just refuse her? And how do I stop feeling this disgust and regret?
Redditors who have died temporarily and came back to life. What did you see? When I was dead, it was black. I didn't hear, see, or smell anything. It might be because I was only dead for such a short time. When they restarted my heart, I felt a pull on the center of my chest and it was like I was literally ripped out of the dark. I remember walking, floating, through this blue tunnel, like a cave that was bright enough to see in. The tunnel wasn't smooth. It was natural, with overlapping layers. At the end, there was the white light that everyone talks about. Before I knew it, I was in it. A disembodied hand reached out to me, and though it was this warm, welcoming feeling, I knew I didn't want to go. It wasn't as if I was scared of what was waiting on the other side, I just felt it wasn't time to go yet. I remember audibly saying that I wasn't ready yet. I woke up in the ambulance, with the EMT hovering over me. Coming back into reality was slow going, and his voice was a groaning mockery of my choice. Everything's going to be alright. Combined with the darkness of the ambulance, though my refusal to go with whoever offered me their hand led me to a fate far worse than just dying.
My poly husband started dating his ex again, so I tried to break them up. My boyfriend and I have been dating for about 2 years now, and we have had an open relationship the entire time. We were both poly before we met each other, so this is not our first time dating multiple people at once. We are each other nesting partners, meaning that we are each other's main partners and we live together. Up until now, I really felt like everything was perfect in our relationship. We always talk about how we feel blessed to have met someone else that's so accepting of our relationship type. Both my husband and I are bisexual and like to have partners of all genders. This has really worked for us. My husband has multiple boyfriends, and I have lots of girlfriends that come and go. As I said, Everything has been great between us until recently when I found out that my husband's latest boyfriend is actually his ex from 4 years ago. We don't usually tell each other when we start dating someone new, so I only found out about this when he dropped it casually mid-conversation the other day. I was instantly uncomfortable when I found out his new partner was an ex. So I asked some questions to try and settle my unease. I found out they reconnected after seeing each other at a mutual friend's party, and they have been dating again now for about a month. Apparently, they broke up originally because the husband's feelings weren't as strong as his boyfriend's. If that's why they broke up, I don't see how they could reconnect. Why would my husband's feelings suddenly switch up? Even though my husband and I have always had an open relationship, he's never dated an ex before, and I am not okay with it. I just feel like there's too much risk and history there, and I don't like the idea of him prioritizing this old flame over me. I also found out he has only been seeing his ex and me. He stopped seeing all his other partners since they reconnected. I knew it would have been smarter to just speak to my husband directly about how I was feeling, but I was embarrassed about feeling insecure, so I just held all my anxieties in. The other day, my husband was in the shower as we were getting ready for bed, and his phone rang while it was charging next to me. When I looked at the screen, I saw it was his ex calling. My mind moved a mile a minute, and the next thing I knew, I was picking up the phone. I lied to his ex and told him that my husband was not interested in him anymore and that he wanted to be left alone. When his ex asked why my husband was telling him directly, I just said that he had asked me to pass on the message because it was too difficult for him to admit. His ex sounded hurt on the phone, but agreed to leave my husband alone. It's only been a couple of days, but my husband is a mess since he can't get in contact with his boyfriend. He keeps telling me how worried he is about how since he just disappeared, but I just don't have the heart to tell him what I did.
What's the biggest way you failed when trying to flirt with someone? I met him at the gym, and I've been eyeballing him since he entered the place. He had an older, hairier, thick Italian Henry Cavill look to him that I couldn't keep my eyes off of. Once he finished his set and was resting, I couraged up, silently prayed to God, and went over to compliment him on his form. He smiled and thanked me, and we small talked on lifting stuff, and I'm too proud to admit that I just do squats for the ass. Then, sensing that he's comfy and hasn't rejected me yet, I made more eye contact and started lightly brushing his upper arm with my hand while complimenting his smile. The next thing I remember was a bunch of people on top of me just looking worried and one of the attendants was on her phone. Long story short, he punched me hard in the face, knocking me out for about 10 minutes. The paramedics came and checked me out, and my nose was definitely broken, and 2 teeth were knocked out from me hitting my face on a rack when I fell back. Suddenly he came to my side while they were putting me on the stretcher, and apologized profusely for hitting me. I had no reason to, but I apologized to him for misinterpreting his friendliness. Sometimes my gut feeling is off, but at least they're nice about it. Assuming it was fear of me pressing charges against him, he didn't leave my side the whole time they transported me to the hospital. He followed the ambulance, and waited in the lobby till he could talk to me. Cutting the story short, he's newly divorced from a woman of 6 years. He started frequenting our gym because he was trying to find male hookups, and I was the first one to talk to him like that since he joined. Not all used to it, his knee-jerk reaction was to smash my face in. 4 years later, we're married, and he hasn't hit me not even a second time ever since. But his ex-wife hates me for helping him and their children sin, though. What is your most memorable Christmas? My daughters came to live with us in late November 2004 from a crappy foster care situation and living in a van with their substance-using adult entertainment worker biological mom before that. Things were still very new to them. They were still adjusting to their new home and were amazed at the simple things like eating, playing with toys that belonged to them and having nice clothes to wear. When the Christmas tree went up, they didn't have any idea what it was. They thought it was pretty and enjoyed decorating it and looking at it, but other than that, no clue. When we talked about Santa, they were clueless about that as well. They couldn't believe such a thing was possible. They were 4 and 5 years old at this point and had never experienced a Christmas of any consequence. We took them to the nice mall for a visit to Santa. They asked, "Dad, that man really brings us presents?" Of course, I explained and told them the whole deal. I was really bothered by the fact that they came from a foster home and never got a single present, a tree or any of the traditions associated with it. When we picked up the girls from the foster home, the foster mom didn't give us anything except a bag of men's tube socks. No toys, dolls, nothing. Gradually stacks of presents gathered under the tree, and on Christmas Eve we put out milk and cookies for Santa. They were very skeptical about the whole deal and were questioning the whole down the chimney thing and trying to find holes in my story. We were listening to Christmas music and reading stories and they kept running to the front window. I thought they were looking for Santa. Finally, I said, "Santa won't come till later after you are asleep." The girls said, "No Dad, we are looking for the policemen, they always come get us at Christmas." My heart broke a little. When the girls went to sleep, I put on my big work boots, stomped them around in the fireplace and left dirty boot prints on the white carpet leading to the cookies, took a bite, drank some milk, put out the Santa presents and went to sleep. The next morning about 8 a.m. I heard a tremendous squealing and laughing. They dragged me downstairs to show me the footprints and the half-eaten cookie. "He's real, he's real," they yelled. They didn't care about the presents at all. They were caught up in the magic and that was fine with me.
My insecure husband told me to quit my job if I truly loved him. I laughed in his face and he threw me out. I live with my partner and work in research. My primary colleague and I have worked together for 2 years on a major project involving significant intellectual and labor contributions from us both. The project is expected to span at least another 2 years, and is vital to both of our careers. Not long ago, my colleague confessed to me that he is, and has been, infatuated or in love with me for pretty much the duration. It took place via a long email that was written after an evening of drinking. This was totally unexpected. In retrospect, there may have been some signs, but nothing that wouldn't just as easily be accounted for by a considerate personality. Shortly after this confession, I came to my husband with the issue. I wanted to get his advice about the situation, and showed him the drafts which I composed to organize my thoughts on the matter. They stated unequivocally that I'm not interested in a romantic relationship, and hope these feelings won't complicate our work together. I was again surprised at my husband's reaction. He seemed offended, to think I must have invited my colleague's affections, and that I should immediately quit my job. As in, put in notice tomorrow. I was so taken aback my immediate reaction was to laugh and snort at this suggestion, which was probably a mistake. That would be utterly disastrous for my career, and isn't an option I'm willing to consider. I'd greatly prefer the entire scenario had never happened, as a difficult and lengthy project hangs in the balance, but I have no real concern at this point about my colleague forcing the issue or letting it compromise our work. It seemed like an intoxicated getting my feelings off my chest. I'll need to put a lot of thought and caution into how I proceed with the work dynamic, but abandoning our project isn't even on the table. About a week has passed. My husband has been alternating between irate and the silent treatment, and suggested several times that I should move out of the house to be with my new spouse. Today I swung by the house on my lunch break and found the locks changed and my luggage on the patio. I have been blocked on his work number and cell. Obviously he cannot possibly intend for me to really move out, and is just pulling what I absolutely believe to be in jerkish power sulk, but seeing how seriously he's taking this has my doubts up. Maybe I was ultimately too uncompromising when I refused to even entertain quitting my job for the sake of conversation and his feelings, and to shut the idea down so abruptly. Am I the a-hole? Update: hubby called me. Long story short, he's been extremely anxious each day when I leave for work, and buckled from that pressure today. I'm welcome back home once I quit my job, which is obviously still unacceptable. I ended up calling my sister, something I avoided initially because I didn't want to stir the pot by involving family members who are already disliked by husband. I'm currently with her and cousin, who are both supportive. My husband tried to bar my cousin from entering the family home to retrieve my things, which escalated to a physical confrontation. The police arrived and both husband and cousin were made to leave the premises. My sister and I changed the locks the next day to secure the house, and I'm staying with family for a little while I plan my next move, which will in all likelihood be a divorce. My boyfriend keeps drinking his own nut after intimacy. I've been in a relationship with Dave for a year. After the very first time we had intimacy, he removed the rubber and, with very expert gestures, proceeded to drink his nut right out of it. I was shocked and confused. Since I used to be a people pleaser, I managed to hide my shock and disgust, and simply asked him, "Why did you do that?" He answered me, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, "It's a lot of calories of energy, I can't waste them." I was even more confused. I was literally speechless, and what was being a very nice and romantic night managed to become a weird and kinda awkward situation. To make things worse, he even stated in a very dramatic tone, "I will never allow anyone to eat my nut, no one but me." By the way, he wasn't drinking his nut in a suggestive way, he did it like it was an extremely serious and important deal. He would gulp it down. He would smack his lips after it was finished and comment as to how delicious it tasted. We kept dating for several months, and every time we had intimacy, every single time, he did the same thing. Also, his breath right after this ritual almost made me throw up all the time, since he even refused to brush his teeth afterwards. I didn't chew, I swallowed it in one gulp, so I don't need to brush my teeth. Ew. I tried to discreetly make him understand that his habit was grossing me out, by saying out loud ew or by covering my eyes, but he didn't get the clues. A year passed by. I had enough. I tried to confront him, but nope. He was unmovable. Neither the fact that his passion for his own nut was making me a little uncomfortable, nor the fact his breath smelled bad after it. He then proceeded to get mad. He stated that he wasn't doing anything wrong, that he just didn't want to waste precious substances from his body, and that I was making a scene for nothing. I told him about his breath, and he straight up accused me of having a bad smell. I told him that by deflecting my accusation he was just making things worse, but then he interrupted me and just told me I was insufferable. Then he just left. He was extremely angry. I've never seen that side of him. I'm sure that he will tell me to pack my things and to leave. So I'm mad, confused and scared about his behavior. Redditors, what's the rudest thing a coworker has ever said to you? When I was 17, I had a bad car accident that nearly unalived me. My car flipped over many times, but my seatbelt saved my life. I raised my hands over my head as the car rolled, which ended up tearing and scarring much of the skin on my forearms. The doctors thought about fixing it with plastic surgery, but my family couldn't afford it. So, I took care of my arms as best as I could. After a few years, the scars on my arm weren't as bad as they used to be. I was still shy about them, though, and I usually wore long sleeves to hide them, even when it was hot outside. Later on, I got a job at my university's library, and one of my coworkers, Christine, was an incredibly rude and condescending person. She always said mean things about younger people and made everyone feel bad. One busy day at work, my sleeve slipped up, and Christine saw my scars. She made this disgusted gasp, like an "og," and shouted, "Ew, gross. What the hell did you do to yourself? Your arm is disgusting." I felt embarrassed and hurt, but I didn't let it slide. I told her that the scars were from a car accident that almost took my life, and these were scars from broken glass. I also thanked her for reminding me of one of the scariest moments of my life. Christine didn't know what to say after that, and the rest of my coworkers just stared at her in disgust. After that, she never spoke to me at work again. Eventually, she quit her job, and I'm not sure why. Maybe our interaction made her think about how she treated others. Even though the situation was tough, I stood up for myself, and my coworkers and the students nearby supported me. It's important to speak up against unkindness, and that's what I did. My entitled mother-in-law photoshopped my husband's nose in all our wedding photos. I have been with my husband for 7 years. I remember that early in our relationship, one of the first things he expressed insecurity about was his nose. Specifically, about its width. He never wanted surgery, but thinks his nose is too big for his face. I never thought that true, and for a long time, I wondered where he'd gotten that idea from. Then I met his mother, and all my doubts went out the window. I don't hate her, but the woman complains about everything. And she seems particularly interested in criticizing her sons. Barely anything about my husband or his older brother is good enough for her, and if it is, she is quick to imply they don't deserve it. According to my brother-in-law, that behavior didn't start until father-in-law passed, about 8 years ago, so they don't usually hold it against her. But to me, it seems like she legitimately doesn't want her children to be happy. Most times we talk to her, my husband ends up devastated. She constantly complains about me, his job, our apartment and his appearance. She has, on more than one occasion, suggested he get a nose job. That tends to upset him, so I always try to shut that down as quickly as possible. We got married in early May. The photos were ready about 2 months later, and we created a shared album on Google Photos for our friends and family, including mother-in-law. I got pregnant during our honeymoon, can't recommend Dubrovnik enough, and I'm now 24 weeks along. We've had problems with mother-in-law concerning my pregnancy, we're having a boy, and she had a breakdown because she wanted a girl, that forced us to put her on an info diet. That was 2 months ago, and she has since improved her behavior. Because of that, we said yes when she invited us to go to a mall near her place to shop for baby clothes last Saturday. My husband had an emergency at work and ended up not coming, but we still managed to have a good time. When we were done, she invited me back to her place. I hadn't been there in a while, and I quickly saw that she'd gotten some of our wedding pictures up on the wall. I instantly noticed something was wrong with them, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was yet. Mother-in-law saw what I was looking at and proudly announced that she'd gotten someone to fix his nose. In other words, she gave her son a Photoshop nose job. On his wedding pictures. I couldn't believe it. I never thought she'd stoop so low. It wasn't even a good nose job, it was so bad that my husband's face didn't look real. He looked like a Ken doll, and not in the hot Ryan Gosling way. Mother-in-law must have seen how mad I got, because she instantly tried to defend herself. She tried to make the point that her son deserved to look his best on his wedding day, and I should have convinced him to get the real nose job before our ceremony. I made up an excuse to leave, but I could tell she knew the real reason. She's been calling and texting me almost every day since. I've been ignoring her, but she's always either apologizing, accusing me of overreacting or begging me not to tell my husband. I know it seems trivial, but I'm outraged. And the more I think about it, the more disgusted I get. I could never imagine doing something like that to my child. I haven't told my husband yet. Mostly because we've both been busy with work this week, but also because I have no idea how to. His mother was finally starting to be a better person around him and his brother, and I know it will break his heart to find out about this. I don't know what to do. I have to tell him, but I can't figure out how. I know he loves his mother, and I don't want to damage whatever relationship they still have. Mother-in-law also mentioned she intended to send the improved pictures to some of her relatives, so I have to find a way to shut that down. But what happened next was even crazier. My entitled mother-in-law photoshopped my husband's nose in all our wedding photos. So I sat him down last Saturday and broke the news. I explained what the pictures were and mother-in-law's excuses for them. I also showed him the text she'd sent me since my visit. The whole conversation, I was calm and straightforward, but made it very clear that not only did mother-in-law's actions completely disgust me, but I never agreed with her about his appearance. He's the most gorgeous man I've ever met, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with his nose. I also made sure to point out that the photoshopped nose made him look like front-facing Phineas from Phineas and Ferb, and mother-in-law needs to get her eyes checked if she really thought it looked good. I thought the news would hurt him, and I was right. He didn't cry or anything, but I could see it in his face. The odd, but common combination of disappointment and acceptance. He knew his mother wouldn't change, but still had some hope. It was almost heartbreaking to watch. But for the first time in a while, He seemed to believe me when I said his nose was normal. He told me that now that he knew just how ridiculous mother-in-law was willing to be, her opinion meant a lot less to him. So even though he's hurt, he feels stronger than ever. As many of you suggested, I told him that he was free to approach the situation however he pleased, but I don't want to be around his mother anymore. Most importantly, I don't want her around our son, or any other kids we might have. Not only because of the guilt-tripping tantrums that have become her standard behavior, but also because of the way she treats the people she's supposed to love. I know she loves her family, but I doubt she knows how love works. If she's willing to treat her sons like this, I fully expect her to be even worse to her grandchildren. In the end, my husband and I decided we're going very LC with mother-in-law until the holidays. Some of his relatives are throwing a party the week before Christmas, and she'll be there. We thought about skipping it, but he has cousins he hasn't seen in years coming for the party. He's been looking forward to seeing them for months, and it doesn't feel fair to let mother-in-law ruin his excitement. After the holidays, we'll decide how to proceed. Regardless, she won't be allowed to see our son at the hospital when he's born. And once we bring him home, she won't be left alone with the baby. It doesn't matter how much she tries to improve, that is not something we're willing to budge on. In spite of everything, my husband doesn't want to cut ties with his mother, and I understand that. Even if he wanted to, he can't go fully NC without cutting off the rest of his maternal family as well, which he is firmly against. What works best for now is to treat her like Domino's Pizza. She exists and that's fine, but we're not getting involved until she actually improves. I also decided to tell some of my own family about this, and everyone I've talked to agrees that mother-in-law went over the line. My father is a narcissist who I'm mostly LC with due to his entitled behavior. Most recently, he tried to make me disinvite his ex from my wedding so he could bring his mistress, and even he was offended on my husband's behalf. And if even my mediocre, respect your elders father thinks your children are right about you being an asshole, you've probably gone too far. We talked to my brother-in-law, and he's the one who informed mother-in-law of our decision. She didn't take the news well. She's now trying to call both me and my husband, and keeps texting apologies and promises to take the pictures down. We're ignoring her. Brother-in-law visited her yesterday, and apparently the pictures are gone. She believed that was enough for us to forgive her, but he clarified that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. Before anyone calls us dramatic, this isn't just about the Photoshop. This is about the damage she's caused in both her sons' lives. I was abused in a similar fashion in my teens by Dad's ex, and I refuse to allow my child to grow up believing he's anything less than beautiful. Same goes for my husband.
What is a genetics fact that not a lot of people know? 1. There is a gene called TP53, it's referred to as the guardian of the genome. It is a tumor suppressor gene and prevents cancer of all types. Humans have 2 copies and if one is mutated, it causes an inherited condition called Leigh-Fraumeni. People with this have a very very high risks for cancer, and the condition can be passed down in families. Elephants have 20 copies of TP53 and therefore rarely get cancer. The Leigh-Fraumeni Foundation uses the elephant as its mascot and hopefully we can someday figure out how to replace faulty TP53 genes for these families. 2. Some genetic diseases persist because having one copy of the disease-causing version of that gene can have benefits, so even though having 2 copies is deadly, that copy of the gene doesn't go away in the population. 3. There's a genetic disease called Laronde syndrome that makes you shorter in stature, a longer life expectancy, and near immunity to cancer and diabetes. 4. When you're pregnant, bits of DNA from your baby invade your body and settle all over permanently, including in your brain. Researchers found this by looking for male DNA in the brains of deceased 70-year-olds. Interestingly, mouse studies have also shown that fetal cells within the mother have restorative properties and will rush to places like the heart, kidneys, lungs, liver if it's injured and can even become cells that begin beating. One of the theories I have seen but I don't know if anyone knows for certain if this is true is that these cells enter our bodies so a host is less likely to reject the parasite baby. 5. Since navel oranges have no seeds, they are all clones of the original mutated fruit discovered by a Brazilian monk a century ago. The billions and billions of navel oranges that have been grown, sold and consumed since are all genetically identical.
My husband's family doesn't approve of me. Today, his mother tried to murder me. I, 25 female, and my husband, 27 male, have been in a loving relationship for almost 6 years. We got married around 1 year ago on our 5-year anniversary, and the backlash from his family has been excessive. They mostly insulted my appearance, saying I'm an ugly and how my husband deserves better than a who is using him and is going to leave him in a year or 2 for another man. Although my husband has never believed these allegations, it's gotten to the point where I can tell he's starting to become suspicious of me. Lately, he's been very insecure about himself. He always asks me to check my messages, and whenever he sees me texting another man like a coworker, he gets incredibly agitated until I show him that the chat is mostly professional. He's also been asking me questions about random men I see on social media, like, would you sleep with him if you had the chance? And, do you think he's hotter than me? I can tell that his family's words are influencing him as we've never had that type of problem before. I decided that with time, he'd gain more trust for me and stop asking these questions, but a week ago, he invited his mom over. We've had several conversations and arguments about how I don't like his mom and we came to a mutual agreement that if his mom was staying over, he'd defend me if she said anything bad about me. And while he did, Eventually, he had to go to the bathroom, and his mom took the chance to unleash her rage on me. She kept calling me terrible names and making jokes that imply that I've cheated on my husband. I got very upset at these jokes, and finally, I decided to stick up for myself. We got in an argument about why she doesn't trust me, where she called me even worse names, and it got very heated. My husband intervened and defended me until her mom took her stuff and left. Not long after, I started crying. My husband had to comfort me and tell me his mom didn't mean that stuff and she was just looking out for him. I wish that was the case. Yesterday, I ran into his mom on the way to the store. I was already very nervous to see her, as this was an empty street where not many cars ever come through, and it got even worse when she initiated small talk. The conversation slowly got more aggressive until eventually she started yelling at me, calling me a dirty and attacking me. She eventually picked up a glass bottle from the floor and threw it at me, shattering into tiny pieces and impaling my skin. I was very bloody and decided to run away, but she managed to catch up to me as I'm not a very fast runner. She tripped me and attacked me until I passed out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. I had to get many stitches and I had fractured my ankle. I guess some pedestrians had seen me laying there hurt and decided to call for help. My husband was there, asking me what happened. When I explained the entire story to him, he seemed skeptical. He looked at me suspiciously and I could tell he was doubting the story. He said he'd talk to his mother and sort this issue out. He hasn't contacted me since then and I'm very worried. I'm still in the hospital while typing this. I don't know what to do. I've tried contacting my husband many times but he hasn't responded. I don't know if I did something wrong or if he believes his mom more than me, but I need advice.
My racist kids ruined my wife and now she wants to replace them. My wife wants a baby but I'm afraid she will stop loving the kids we have now. When I was 15 I went to my first party and I ended up losing my V card. I later found out she was pregnant. She wanted to baby garbage it, but when my parents found out, they were against the baby garbage and ended up convincing her to keep the pregnancy and we would pay her for it, and when babies would be born she could sign away her parental rights and we'd never bother her. Which is what happened. She gave birth to my twin boys that I love dearly. We were pretty well off, so I had a nanny and it never slowed down my education. In college I, 22, met my now wife Hannah, 20. I instantly fell in love with her. She was beautiful, very smart and oddly skilled with knives. She was very caring, and sometimes into our relationship I told her I had kids and she was fine with it. Later in our relationship she met the boys and they fell in love with each other quickly. We later got married at 25 and 23 and she moved in. The boys loved and cared for her. They would give her lots of kisses and hugs, and truly I was so happy to see my three favorite people get along. I'm a pale man with white hair and my boys favored that, while my wife is a dark-skinned woman. Once, my wife dropped off the boys and kissed them, and their classmates picked on them for having a black mom, and to retaliate they said she was their nanny. We talked about it and my wife chose to never accompany them to school again. My wife has this trip that she has always wanted to go on with her kids and has dreamed of it since she was a kid and went with her parents. She told me about it and we went together to go visit the place. First, she hasn't seen it in a long time and wanted to make sure it looked same as she remembered, and two, to don't trust her anymore since the last time she suggested a place she used to love. We ended up in dance club for disabled people. She was even more excited to take the boys and she made matching clothes for them and the boys helped her. 5 months ago I celebrated my 7-year wedding anniversary with my wife and posted it. It was great until one of my kids' classmates found it and showed other people, and my boys started getting picked on for having a black mom, and especially one so dark. They were lashing out at my wife and saying very racist and disrespectful things to her. 2 months later I got a call from a woman who claimed to be the mother of my children, and surely enough it was true. We'll call her Beth. She came back saying she wanted to check up on the boys and see how they were doing. I talked to my wife about this and she figured it would be good for the boys to meet their biological mom. They met and a month later my wife's trip was approaching. The boys suggested that Beth come along, but there were only 4 tickets and this trip had been planned out and booked 3 years prior, and it would be difficult to accommodate a 5th person since for most of the events, tickets were sold out. My older son suggested Beth comes instead of my wife since it's a family trip. My wife started to beg and plead with them that they had been planning this trip for a long time and it was their trip. I told the boys that Beth would not be going on this trip. I went on a business trip for 2 the next day, and while I was away, there was a party the boys asked to go to that I specifically said no to and instructed my wife to not let them go either. The boys tried to go when my wife reminded them of what I said, and they told her she wasn't their mother and to stop acting like it. I repeated that it was order and she couldn't let them go. The boys blamed her for their bio mom not being able to go on the trip, and long story short, one of my boys slapped her. I came home Saturday morning as I always do because everyone is home and they all wake up early to come greet me, and my wife would usually be making something delicious, with loud music playing, and my boys would be arguing over something and they would always run to hug me. When I came the house was quiet, no one was downstairs. I went to check on the boys and they were in a bad mood, and I went to find my wife and she was in bed just laying there. I later found out what happened and scolded the boys and cancelled the trip. They begged and pleaded with me and apologized to my wife. She said there was no need to cancel the trip since I spent so much money on it. So I suggested she goes with Beth and the boys. She pointed out some safety concerns since we don't really know Beth as well and she's not exactly strong, so she forced me to go. While on the trip I called her a lot, but she preferred to text. A week later we got back and noticed the plants were dry, even though my wife prides herself in her garden. The inside looked exactly as it was when we left. I checked our house alarm system and noticed the door hadn't been opened since it closed when we left. I found my wife laying in her sewing room with all of my alcohols, even though she had never drunk any before, and I also noticed all of the clothes she made for the trip had been cut apart. She continued not to speak or move for the next 2 days, so I had to bathe her, but she wouldn't take any food. After some time she started to eat and hold me back when I would hug her, and we finally talked. I apologized for everything that had happened and she accepted my apology and forgave the boys. I noticed the 2 days that followed that she didn't really speak to the boys like she used to. She hasn't hugged them, kissed them, or made any cute comments about how much she loved them. A Friday also passed and she usually does game nights, but she hasn't. I confronted her and she told me she wasn't their mother, and her job was to make sure they were taken care of and she wasn't hurting them in any way. It has been like that since. The house is quiet, our relationship is back to normal, and she's affectionate towards me and everything, but she's not like that with the kids. A backstory about my wife: she has always wanted kids. She wanted only 2 kids to be specific because she didn't want to drive a minivan. Before we got married we talked about the kids and she told me she didn't want any since she now has 2 boys. I asked twice after that because I make enough and we have a 6-bedroom house, so it wouldn't be a problem. But she gave me the same answer, telling me she already has 2 kids. Today she told me wanted a baby. I feel if I do agree she will completely let go of the kids we have now. How should I go about this? Has anyone else who's remarried had an issue with their kids not getting along with a new partner? Men of Reddit, what is something you'll never understand about women? How are their feet always so cold? How do they get out of the shower and do that weird thing on their head with a towel? Then all of a sudden they have this monument on their head. When she asks me what are you thinking, and I say nothing, why won't she believe me? How can they magically make things appear in front of them? That I've spent 15 minutes looking for shower temperature? What the F is up with this Mordor water? Why must you feel pain to feel cleansed? I have a wife and 2 daughters who will bring up issues and problems they encounter. I still have not quite learned that they do not want a discussion about how to solve these problems. How can you talk to your mom on the phone for multiple hours every week? My dad calls me when he needs me to order something on Amazon for him, and that's about it. Frenemy behavior? Why do you keep other women around that you actively despise just to complain about them? Why do they need so many pillows? Taking her bra off without taking her top off? It's effing black magic. Man, I need a PhD in geometry just to understand it. Pete Davidson. Confused 22-year-old husband seeking advice on what to do with wife. I understand that discussing sensitive topics with strangers can be difficult, but I'm here to offer some assistance. It seems that you're facing challenges in your marriage, and I'll do my best to help you navigate through this. Please bear with me, as English is not my first language. You and your wife got married approximately 14 months ago, yet you haven't engaged in any intimate activities together. Initially, your wife mentioned being shy, so you respected her need for time. After 3 months, you began initiating, but she consistently turned you down and provided various excuses. This pattern continued over the course of your marriage. You eventually gave up after 5 months, feeling confused about her consistent refusal. This issue has caused numerous fights, and attempts to discuss it with her have been met with excuses or insults. Arranged marriages are common in our South Asian culture. You and your wife knew each other for 2 years before getting married, with the permission of her parents. Although you may feel hesitant, it's important to address this matter openly and honestly. It's possible that your wife has her reasons for her behavior, but it's crucial to have a respectful conversation to understand her perspective. Express your feelings and concerns, and listen attentively to what she has to say. Open communication may lead to a deeper understanding of each other's needs and allow for compromises or solutions to be found. Considering divorce should be a last resort, as it can have a significant impact on both families involved. Explore all possible avenues for resolving the issue before reaching such a decision. Remember that relationships require effort and understanding from both partners. You mentioned that your wife is a stay-at-home wife, and you have hired maids and cooks, so her refusal may not be related to fatigue from household chores. It's essential to address this matter with sensitivity, as there may be underlying factors affecting her behavior. Professional counseling or therapy could help both of you navigate through this challenging situation and improve your relationship. Ultimately, it's up to you to evaluate whether this relationship is worth the effort. A healthy and fulfilling marriage should be based on mutual respect, love, and open communication. It may take time and patience to work through this, but with sincere effort from both partners, it's possible to find a resolution. A special needs girl is inappropriately touching me and I can't do anything. I, 17, have been going to a program called Bosses, which is basically a program to do things that interest you and you get a grade for it. I've been in said program since September 7th, and since then I've been inappropriately catcalled, touched, had my personal space invaded, and a destroyed reputation by a special needs girl. We'll call her A. I first met A on the first day of Bosses. We were doing a sketching clothes for the first day so the teacher could find out about our fashion type or something along those lines. While I was drawing my clothes, I heard A mention me to her aide. I thought at first she was talking about someone else in the program. There was 10 students including her and me. After a few minutes she finally came up to me and began talking to me about my drawing. I tried to be simple and bland towards her as I was too focused on designing my clothes, but the more I respond to her, the more she got closer and closer towards me. It got to the point where me and her were touching shoulders. After what seemed like hours, we had to go to the computer room to do an Google Slides presentation assignment. Me being the introverted kid I am, I decided to sit all the way in the back, and who decides to sit next to me? A, of course. It didn't help that she was asking me questions on the most basic stuff ever. How to move images, how to change the font, how to add a photo. Like, ma'am, you have an aide, ask her. But finally, after 30 minutes of her asking me questions, it was her time to board the bus back to her school. I thought to myself, man, this day was not good. It gonna get better. But was I wrong? The next day we went back to the computers. I was doing the finishing touches on my project, when out of nowhere, A comes up from behind me, covers my eyes with her cold hands and goes, guess who? Mind you, her aide and another student saw her do this and didn't do a single thing about it, and for the next 3 hours, she grabbed and rubbed my arms, legs, thigh, neck, back, and my ears, and copied my entire Google slide presentation image by image, color by color. Then we had to go present our projects, and our teacher, m''s.g, saw that our projects, she made a comment about how we could be related based on our projects. I started laughing and rubbing my back while staring at me. Mind you that everyone was staring at me, none of them did or say anything. Later into the class she found she was being transferred into a different class, which I thought it was the end of it. After school I told my dad and mom after what's been going on so far. My dad just told me to let the aide or the teacher take care of it and that I'm doing a good thing by. My mom however went ballistic. She wasn't yelling or anything. More of I want to cause a problem in their type of mad. In the end, she told me to also tell the teacher and the aide, but I unlike my mom, didn't want to cause problems, so I didn't do anything for 7 days. Those 7 days became the worst, humiliating, depressed time of my life. Every day before class ends, she would come, grab and rub me into places I didn't want to be rubbed or grabbed in, and make flirtatious statements at me, which again, 9 other people saw this happening including my teacher and they didn't do jack. I even tried to do a help signal, either no one understood it or they just didn't care. After the 7th day I had enough and grabbed her arm, placed it on the table. I then looked around and saw a dude and a girl giving me a dirty look like I was doing something wrong. I let go of her hand and she still continued to touch me. On the bus ride home, I decided enough is enough and email m''s.g, the counselor for bosses, her aide, my school counselor, my mom, etc. What resulted is a 2 to 3 hour phone call in which, according to my mom, they tried to put the blame on me by telling my mom that I was probably doing something to indulge it and I put my hands on her in a violent way. However, thanks to my counselor, and my dad for comforting my mom so she doesn't beat some boss's ass, they made a deal for A to never enter my class or wait for me in the hall. Usually this is where the story ends. I live happy ever after living the rest of my 17-year-old life, but no, it gets worse. 2 weeks after I was walking out of the class when I saw A and her aide waiting for me, I tried to indulge in conversation with me, which I ignored to the best of my ability, and I guess she didn't like it very much, which then she grabbed the hood of my hoodie and yanked it towards her, in which I grabbed her hands and put it towards her waist and gave her aide a dirty look that reads, "Do your fucking job." I wasn't mad at it though. I got mad over some other earlier that day. I never saw her again until the last 2 days, where out of nowhere she comes into my room, and instead of kicking her out, m''s.g welcomes her in which of course she's sitting next to me, but no touch however, so thought she must have improved, but boy oh boy was I wrong. Yesterday it was the first 15 minutes of class, we drawing poses for our models, in which A comes in with a box of stuff, probably something related to her class, and ask m''s.g where should she put it? And out of all the places she could have she said to put it next to me, and if you think that was, she comes to me and goes, "What's up honey baby pie?" Out loud for the whole class to hear. Not even 5 seconds later, she puts her neck on my shoulders and starts to hug me while she grabs one of my thighs, which the teacher saw and didn't do anything about it. It's not until I stared at her aide is when she decided to stop hugging me, and now here we are. Stuck in situation where I can't talk to my counselors cause they'll try to blame it on me, I can't tell my parents cause I don't want them to freak, and I most certainly can't tell my teacher, classmates to help or A to stop, cause they're gonna just ignore me and continue to pretend like nothing is going on. Now I come to Reddit asking for help, something I've never thought I would be doing, but I guess what's more trustworthy than strangers on the internet? Any help and support is acceptable, and thanks for reading my long ass post. Is it appropriate to not invite your parents to your wedding? I dated a guy for 6 years. He had children from a previous relationship, 3 boys and 2 girls. When the boys were 13, 14 and 15 their mother left them in a house with no running water, no electricity and no food. They came to live with us at my insistence. My ex was a terrible father, but I stayed with him so I could keep the boys safe, housed and in decent condition. After 3 years, he became too much to deal with, so I broke up with him, but still had a great relationship with the youngest and oldest. The middle one was too much like his dad. Fast forward 4 years, I have a wonderful boyfriend who is a terrific dad to his kids and my son who I adopted as a single mom. He's very close with the youngest of the older boys and we all are just family. My boyfriend and former stepson took to each other like peanut butter and jelly. They have a fantastic relationship, and even though my stepson lives out of state are very close. My stepson lives less than 20 miles from his father, but my ex is a terrible dad and does treat the boys well, so they don't have a lot of interest in spending time with him. Last year, my stepson was getting married. He asked me to step in as the mother of the groom. I immediately said yes and was so honored. Then, he asked my boyfriend to be his best man and step in as the father of the groom. My boyfriend was hesitant because he was afraid he would cause permanent damage to the relationship between my stepson and his dad. I assured him that his dad did that damage and he wasn't invited to the wedding because he would ruin it and make it all about him. Also, he has a severe alcohol problem and once he crossed the line it would be horrible for everyone. My boyfriend stepped in and the wedding was beautiful, fun and solidified the relationship he has with our son. We are now excited to be welcoming our honorary granddaughter this November. Blood doesn't always make you family, and you are not obligated to invite family members who are toxic or not dependable.
Try and cheat on me? I'll make you regret the day you ever crossed me. My boyfriend is an effing loser. Let me just come right out and say it. We've been together for 3 years, and he has been unemployed for the majority of the time that we've been together. He has trouble holding down jobs since he oversleeps all the time and is always on his phone at work. The best job he's ever had is substance dealing, and he's not even very good at that. We were high school sweethearts. Back then, he was an ambitious athlete with a bright future. But after his baseball career didn't work out, it's like he just gave up on life. Meanwhile, I worked hard in high school and went straight to college after graduating. I'm set to graduate on time with a valuable degree, and I'm proud of all my hard work. College has been hard so far. Since my boyfriend and I live together, every time he loses another job, I have to pay all the bills myself. He is always telling me he will eventually pay me back, but he never has. Before all this bullshit happened, I was already getting so sick of him. And now I see that I should have left him long ago. Anyway, my boyfriend's schedule is basically non-existent. He stays at home and cleans here and there, but mostly he just plays video games or watches reels. It's not weird for him to be on his phone a lot, but recently things got weird. I noticed he was being very secretive with his phone out of nowhere. I had always known his password, but he changed it a couple of weeks ago and would get mad if I picked up his phone to check the weather or Google something. I got extremely suspicious when I went to go check the time with his phone since it was closer than mine and he literally ripped it out of my hands. A couple of nights after that I was awake in the middle of the night doing school work and my boyfriend was fast asleep snoring beside me. That's when I heard his phone go off. Who the hell was calling him in the middle of the night? I gave in to my curiosity and checked his phone. It turned out to be a spam notification, but with his phone already in my hand I couldn't resist going further. I used his sleeping face to unlock his phone with Face ID. My boyfriend is a freak who sleeps with his eyes slightly open, so I assume that's the only reason it worked. Anyways, I started going through his messages. Nothing there. So I moved on to his Instagram DMs and that's where I found damning evidence. I found a year's worth of DMs from my boyfriend. All flirty messages to random Insta baddie accounts with huge amounts of followers. It was truly one of the most pathetic things I've ever seen. His messages to these girls were so vulgar and graphic, and I couldn't believe he actually thought he had a chance with any of them. I looked over at my sleeping boyfriend and realized I hated this man with my whole heart. It only took me 5 minutes to create my revenge plan in my head, and the next morning I was ready. I went to work and my boyfriend stayed home as usual. I left before he woke up because I couldn't stomach interacting with him. I made a fake Insta baddie account using AI photos and I messaged my boyfriend from the fake profile. He responded instantly like the loser he is, and after a few flirty messages, I asked him if we could meet in person. He jumped at the opportunity and I set up the meetup to happen in a park near my place the next day. I came home from work early the next day and literally bumped into him as he was walking out to meet his fake Insta daddy. He looked like a deer in the headlights and stammered out something about going to visit his parents an hour away. I just said have a good time and pushed past him to get inside. The moment the door shut behind me, I started packing up all his poop and throwing it into trash bags. 10 minutes later, I messaged my boyfriend from the fake profile, saying that I would be late and if he waited I would make it worth his while. My boyfriend responded with a disgusting, intimate comment and I just rolled my eyes and kept packing. After I was done, I threw all his bags in my car and drove to the park where my boyfriend awaited his fake Insta baddie. When I pulled up to him, he looked shocked, confused, and scared all at once. I pulled up right next to him and gave him a long look of disappointment. He started rambling at excuses and apologies, but I barely let him get a word out before I started throwing all his bags out on the park's grass. He started screaming at me, calling me crazy, and telling me to calm down, but I just kept tossing. He literally held onto my car window as I drove off and I had to step on the gas to get rid of him finally. It was a painful, dramatic breakup, but at least I have finally gotten rid of my parasite of a partner.
What question has someone asked you that secretly broke your heart? First day of preschool for my 3-year-old son. The first time he would ever be away from mom and dad at the same time. I brought him to the room and expected a meltdown, but instead he confidently strutted, and I do mean strutted into the classroom. 3 hours later, I picked him up. He was okay until we got to the car when he said, in quiet sad voice, "I thought you were coming with," followed by an even sadder quieter, "Why did you leave me?" I have a stutter and people always ask me why I'm so quiet. It hurts because I want to be social, but whenever I try I tend to be ignored or cut off halfway through my sentence. Like I want to be social and speak to people, but it's almost impossible for me. As we pass the toy aisle at the store, I know you don't have much money right now, but maybe when you get some we could come back and get a toy? I was not doing well financially back then and my daughter brought me to tears in the middle of the store. I have a stutter. When I was a kid I had to read a page of a book to the class. I stuttered, and the teacher said, "Can you even read?" and that effing broke my 13-year-old heart. No one takes stuttering seriously.
I cheated on a spelling test to get some kids a pizza party. I started helping out in a special education 4th grade class last September. My teacher told the class that if everyone did really well on their spelling tests, we'd have a pizza party. But we haven't hit that goal yet. This week, my teacher said, "This is my last week here. Let's try our best for that pizza party." The kids got super excited. They even studied during their free time, which was awesome to see. One tricky thing is that there are these two kids, Gabby and Sam, who don't get along. Sam has a hard time with spelling because of dyslexia, and Gabby keeps teasing her. The school is working on it, but it's still a problem. After my teacher's pep talk, Gabby yelled out, "Can Sam not take the test? She's gonna make us miss it." We talked to Gabby about it. Even though she's only 9, her comments can be really annoying. Sam practiced a lot for the test, and I stayed after school to help her study. And Friday morning, right before the test, Sam was upset. She didn't want to mess up the pizza party for everyone. I told her how hard she worked and that she was smart. During the test, our teacher says the words and the kids write them down. Most students have the same words, but Sam's are a bit easier. Our teacher whispers Sam's words to her. Sometimes Gabby giggles, which is frustrating. We've talked to her about it, but she hasn't changed. I got really mad last Friday. Gabby giggled again, and I got close and whispered, "I'll fail your test right now if you don't stop. You'll ruin the pizza party," she cried in her seat. I felt bad, but maybe it'll make her stop. After the test, I collected the papers. The kids went to lunch while I graded them. One by one, the tests were great, all 100%. Even Gabby's was perfect. Then I remembered there were only 11 tests. Sam's was still on the teacher's desk. Sam did really well, but one tricky word was spelled wrong. It was a tough word, though. She got 9 out of 10 right, which is amazing. But the others might figure out that she didn't get a perfect score. I didn't want Sam to feel bad, so I fixed the word without telling her. I just switched 2 letters. I hope she won't notice. The kids came back from recess, and we shared the good news. Everyone was thrilled, especially Sam. I'm just happy that I could make their days.
My nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. About midway last week when I came home from work I noticed my shed door was open and the padlock that I used to keep it shut was broken. And I had a lot of bags full of soda cans in there. My friends and I tend to drink a lot of soda, so I've built up a lot of cans over the course of about a year. And I was going to cash them in at the bottle drop soon because I like big payouts. But there was more than just my bags of cans missing from the shed too. They took my gardening shears, a steel rake, 2 shovels, a full 2-gallon gas can, a brand new power drill, an electric hedge trimmer, and a small electric chainsaw, and a machete. I checked my camera footage and there were my 3 nephews, ages 16, 15, and 14, breaking into my shed with one of their dad's large claw hammers. I recognized the hammer because it's bright yellow and black, and their dad has a bunch of them. It only took them a few hits to smash that cheap lock. After they first broke into my shed, they took what they could by hand. And then they came back with some shopping carts that I'm guessing they also stole. But it took them a few trips to get all of the cans. And they didn't bother to even try and close the door when they were done. My sister and brother-in-law first denied their kids stole anything from me. So I went to their house and showed them the security footage from my cameras. I'd not told them I'd had cameras installed. And the reason I had the cameras put in was because of prior thefts by my nephews. It started with food and snacks. And then moved on to DVDs and video games. Then pretty much anything they thought they could smuggle out after that. And any time I made them return stuff they'd stolen from me, I was treated like the bad guy and then got the fakest apologies I've ever heard. And they never got in much trouble from their parents either. The final straw happened last year when my nephews broke into my house and stole 3 6-packs of my favorite beer from my fridge. They used my hidden spare key to get in, and also took a huge dump in one of my bathrooms and not only didn't flush, but also peed all over the floor. And I'm pretty sure it was intentional. The beer they stole was hidden in one of their bedrooms when I confronted my sister and brother-in-law about my nephews stealing it. And I was basically given an equivalent to boys will be boys when I wanted them punished. So I had the cameras put in and told no one. Which was a smart move. When my sister and brother-in-law saw the camera footage of my nephews stealing from me, they seemed furious. But they were actually madder that their boys skipped school to steal from me. They'd spent all day making repeated trips to the bottle drop and cashing the cans by machine. The bottle drop also pays by machine. So they just kept bringing the cans until they cashed them all. And then they bought video games and junk food with the money. Said money actually amounted to nearly $300. With that and the destroyed padlock I told my sister and brother-in-law that they now owed me $300. My sister and brother-in-law went from being angry at their kids to making excuses for them, and then being angry at me for wanting that money back when I know they have 3 kids and a mortgage. I said it was either that or I would go to the police and press charges. They told me to get out, and I said they have 2 days to decide how to pay me back before I go to the cops. I got back everything else my nephew stole, machete and gas can included. Though they'd already used the gas for something. But over the next couple of days my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone with a ton of messages. Both verbal and text. At first they were calling me heartless because it was right after the holidays and they have 3 kids and a mortgage. Then they started gaslighting me. Then even threatening me. And all of this would go in a repeating cycle. My nephews chimed in from another cell phone and were sending me lots of messages of their own. Which were more fake apologies and gaslighting. My eldest nephew even sent me a picture of himself holding a soda can and giving me the middle finger. So I guess they weren't taking my threats of going to the police seriously because family. When I last spoke with my sister and brother-in-law, they refused to negotiate any sort of method of repayment for what my nephews did. Even when I suggested they just sell the video games that were purchased with the money from the cans. Then they had the audacity to say I'd actually tempted my nephews by having the cans in my shed to begin with. Oh yes, I'm the devil snake that tempted my nephews with a shed full of cans that just screamed money money money. So that was it. I went to the police station that morning and filed a report. Gave them a copy of the video footage of my nephews stealing from my shed. I gave them the broken lock they smashed. Showed them all of the texts, which were screenshotted and also given as evidence. I even gave them a copy of the photo my eldest nephew sent me of him flipping me off. I did tell the police that I found it worrisome that my nephews had taken the machete. But they classified it as a tool. Especially since they took a lot of other actual tools. So fair enough on that, I suppose. But my nephews were indeed arrested on Saturday. Police came to their house and my sister and brother-in-law were forced to let them in because they had a warrant. Apparently all three of my nephews went from being cocky little jerks to crying like babies when they were being put in cuffs. I know this because a neighbor I'm acquainted with that sort of friends with my sister was there to see it. And shortly after the arrest my sister and brother-in-law were blowing up my phone again. They weren't able to get their kids out of jail till Monday morning. And now the boys are being charged with larceny, willful destruction of property and vandalism, and harassment. The police took this whole case pretty seriously as there has been complaints about my nephews for some time. But nothing was proven until now. The past few months bags of cans have actually been going missing all over the area. Don't know if it was my nephews or not. But they're likely suspects. And with word spreading of their arrest, let's hope other neighbors with security cameras come forward with more footage. My sister and brother-in-law showed up at my house too. I refused to open the door and told them that this all happened because they are enablers who refuse to hold their kids accountable for their actions. That made them just scream and pound on my door more till I threatened to call the police on them too. And since I've done it already, they know I mean it now. So they left without any more trouble. But they went back to blowing up my phone. I didn't block my sister or brother-in-law. Instead I decided to just save all of the messages they send me because I've made the decision to take them to small claims court over this. I don't really need or want the money, and have already replaced the destroyed padlock with a much better one. However, the kids aren't the only ones who need to be taught a lesson. In the end I hope I put them in enough of a hole that they learn not to screw with me ever again. I also have the full support of my family on this. I'm going to push for my nephews to get community service. And the reason why isn't just because it's a good idea, but also because I know that they'll hate that the most. Whenever they are made to do any kind of work they don't want to do, they just stand around griping and act like the whole world is against them. My nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. I figured that my sister and brother-in-law were gonna dig their heels in even deeper after the crap that's already gone down. But they actually caved. I filed a lawsuit against them in small claims for the actions of their kids. In the suit I was asking for $500. This was for the stolen cans, the destroyed lock, the cost of the replacement lock, the cost of filing with the courts, and emotional damages for the harassment. A friend whose father is a lawyer gave me a free consultation and said I have a very strong case because of the camera footage I have of both my nephews stealing from me, and of my sister and brother-in-law pounding on my front door. Plus all of the messages they sent me. When my sister and brother-in-law were served, they called me freaking out. They said I couldn't do this to them. So I retorted that this is the price they are paying for not parenting their kids and letting them become entitled little thieves. And if they wish to speak to me again, it will either be when I see them in court, or if they decide to pay me the $500 I'm suing for. Then I hung up on them. Well, yesterday evening I was having some friends over after work, but then I got a knock at the door. When I looked outside, there was my sister and brother-in-law. And they looked very unhappy. I opened the door, but left the screen door shut. Then asked them what they were doing at my house. They told me that they're tired of fighting because everyone is against them. And fully admitted how badly they effed up by letting this go as far as they did. And just wanted to make peace. Brother-in-law then slid an envelope through a crack in the door that contained $500 in $50 bills. He said it was from his private savings account. Then told me from now on they'll make sure my nephews are duly punished for their actions. They didn't ask me to drop the charges, but pleaded with me to at least be lenient. I said I was only pushing for community service, which is pretty lenient. And if we cooperate for that, then hopefully the judge will agree. They sighed and said they'd cooperate if that's all I wanted. Then left without making any sort of a fuss. My friends all congratulated me on holding my ground. Others in my family later did the same. That's when I found out from my parents that they actually threatened to disown my sister if she and her husband didn't make some changes for the better. So now they are. It may be a forced change. But it's the best we'll probably see out of them. My mom paid my sister and brother-in-law a visit after they repaid me too. She told me that my nephews were not playing video games. In fact, every single video game related thing was put away somewhere. And so was the TV that my nephews would game and watch movies on. All three nephews were in their rooms most of the time. And were very rude and unwelcoming to their grandmother. But my sister claims they are dealing with the situation. So yeah, I've dropped the lawsuit now that I've been paid what I wanted. But my nephews are still going to court for theft. Update 2, my nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. My nephews went to court for theft and were handed 100 hours of community service. I thought all was settled after my sister and brother-in-law promised to do a better job at parenting them, but my eldest nephew had different ideas. During the 100 hours of community service, he got into screaming matches with everyone who told him to work. His father had to be called over just to make the boy pick up a rake. The kid openly blamed me for his predicament, and his brothers were both initially on his side. But after a while they realized that he's just crazy and entitled, and they no longer want any part of it. A few days later, in the middle of the night, my eldest nephew sneaked out and assaulted my house with a pair of his dad's claw hammers. I say a pair because he literally had one in each hand. The first thing he did was start smashing the new lock on my shed, and it didn't break. But he heavily damaged it to the point it was no longer usable and I had to later remove it with bolt cutters. He also did a lot of damage to the shed door with the hammer's claws. I awoke to the sounds of the hammers, and called the police after peeking out my bedroom window and seeing someone outside hitting the shed. Though I didn't realize it was him at first because he had his face covered with a creepy looking mask. He saw the bedroom lights come on and chucked one of the hammers through my window. There was broken glass everywhere, and I'm lucky I didn't cut my feet on any of it because I was barefoot. Then my nephew started beating on my back door with the remaining hammer. He did major damage, breaking the knob and the window on the door, and also tore into the door itself with the hammer claw. I was worried the door wouldn't hold out, so I yelled that the police were on their way, and he took off before they arrived. The night vision on my camera showed it was him. He had a mask on, but was wearing his school hoodie, as well as his Nike shoes that were also pretty identifiable since his brothers don't have a pair like them. His fingerprints were also on the hammer he threw at my window. My nephews had already all been fingerprinted when they were arrested the first time. So police matched the ones on the hammer to him. When the cops came for my eldest nephew, he obviously denied it was him. But there's no one else it could have been. The other hammer was found in his room, along with the clothes and mask he wore. All of which were taken as evidence. The mask was of a Star Wars character I was told is called the Grand Inquisitor. This time though, his parents did nothing to try and protect him. And they didn't try to pass the blame on me either. They just let their son be taken away screaming. I wasn't there to see the arrest. But I was told by my sister that my eldest nephew was switching back and forth from crying that he didn't do anything wrong, to screaming that it was all my fault and he had to get back at me. The boy had to go through a serious mental evaluation, and was found to be potentially bipolar. Later on, when he was properly diagnosed as bipolar, he started blaming everything he did wrong on that. And acted like he should be vilified just for getting treatment for it. But he ended up having a month-long stint in juvenile hall. They got my nephew properly medicated, and he pleaded guilty to forego court again in exchange for more community service and mandatory counseling, as well as probation this time. His dad came to my house and personally replaced the broken window and door. Though he barely said a word to me while doing it. My two younger nephews are still excluding their older brother from pretty much everything. And he still hasn't apologized for attacking my home either. He's also unfortunately repeating a school year because of how badly his grades tanked. Which his parents are still very unhappy about. My two younger nephews dropped by on their own in July to personally apologize to me. They said that they always just follow their brother's lead, and he made everything they were doing seem so fun. But the punishments for the crimes are not worth the kind of fun they were having. And they don't want anything to do with it anymore. They want their fun uncle back and asked if we could start over. I said we can, but they'll have to earn back my trust. Which they happily agreed to. My eldest nephew had his 17th birthday a few months ago, and basically got nothing. Not even a cake. Meanwhile, my youngest nephew had his birthday a month after that, and got a new mountain bike among his gifts. This really upset my eldest nephew and he slashed the tires on the bike with a kitchen knife. Which landed him in even more trouble. I know a thing or two about fixing bikes, so I went out and bought new tubes and tires for the bike, and put them on it. So the bike is fine, and my nephew thanked me a lot for fixing it. My eldest nephew resorted to trying to run away because he wasn't being enabled anymore. He just walked out, got on his bike with a backpack full of stuff, and rode off. His parents quickly reported him missing because he left a goodbye letter that basically blamed me and his bipolar for all his problems. In the letter he stated that he can't wait till he's 18 to get away from us all. So he was doing us a favor by getting rid of himself sooner. But he came back 3 days later without his bike or backpack, and looking beat up. He wouldn't tell anyone what happened. We still don't know. But he was chewed out for continuously using me as a scapegoat for his personal issues, because blaming me was the first thing he did after he got back. I didn't make him steal from me, I didn't make him attack my house, I didn't make him run away. That was all him. And he nearly ended up back in juvie for running off because he violated his probation. But he got off easy somehow. Currently he spends his days pretty much in his room when not in school, or doing chores, or going to counseling. His probation will last till he's 18. Everyone in the family has outcast him, nobody wants him in their home, and I am told he gets bullied at school and is awfully quiet in it. The Daily also plans to exclude him from Thanksgiving and Christmas. I can't stand him, so I don't care too much. Update 3, my nephew is a kleptomaniac and keeps stealing from me. I contacted the police and my sister and brother-in-law are furious. I was hoping things would get better, but instead they went downhill. Last year my sister and brother-in-law went to Thanksgiving at brother-in-law's parents' house instead of with my parents. Somehow they managed to have the eldest nephew invited, who wasn't exactly on his best behavior over there. My sister and brother-in-law had a long talk with our parents about how excluding my nephew would not help his mental state at the moment. My parents relented and let him come to Christmas Eve. I of course got him a gift. But because I wanted to help him mentally get better, in early December I went out and bought him a used metallic green mountain bike at the local second-hand store. It needed a little bit of work, but was an excellent buy for $30. I also learned that since his good backpack was stolen, he was using an old one that belonged to one of his brothers. So I grabbed a used one at the same second-hand store for about $5. I fixed up the bike and washed the backpack, and when I presented them both to him on a Sunday, he seemed completely shocked I'd give him anything. And it also made him really awkward. But he took them both with a look that said thanks and started using them right away to go to and from school like he did with his old bike and backpack. My sister and brother-in-law were also pretty damn shocked I gave him gifts, let alone replace the stuff that was stolen from him when he ran away after he attacked my house with hammers. But the gifts had the effect I was hoping for. I was no longer the object of his rage. He really had been looking for any excuse to make me out to be the vile snake that ruined his life. But I'm not. When I next saw him, it was at the family Christmas Eve party. And while there, my sister and brother-in-law made him apologize for putting all his anger on me. They loomed over him like shadows while he talked to me. He was told to look me in the eye repeatedly. And in his apology, he admitted that it wasn't my fault he was arrested. He egged me on, he stole from me, and he damaged my property. And he won't do it again. We shook hands and he didn't make any trouble at the party at all. But his parents were like his shadows that entire evening. They didn't leave him alone at all. They might as well have had him on a leash. It was awkward, but I can understand why. They'd put a lot on the line just so he could be allowed to come to Christmas. At New Year's though, things took a dive. My eldest nephew stole a bottle of champagne from his parents and drank it all fast while locked in the bathroom before anyone could stop him. He'd asked for a drink of it prior, and was told he was too young. So he stole one of the bottles and chugged it. We didn't know this until then, but apparently he'd been stealing alcohol for some time before his first arrest. And he kept a hidden stash somewhere that slowly ran out as he only touched it little by little, and even sold some of it to other kids in the neighborhood. He didn't get in massive trouble. Just got sent to his room for the night after he said he stole the booze because he was just really craving it, and it was New Year's. His brothers admitted to their parents about his stash, and showed them where it was hidden. It was a plastic tub in the crawlspace under the house. When confronted about how they got all the alcohol, my two younger nephews admitted to following their brother's lead, and only stole only one beer at a time, or poured some hard alcohol from its original bottle into another bottle little by little. And then the biggest bomb. They had been sneaking into other people's houses and doing the same thing all over the neighborhood. Their way of breaking in was to look for unlocked doors and windows, no houses with dogs because they'd bark, and the youngest would crawl in through windows because he was the smallest. And then he'd unlock the doors to let his brothers in. They made sure not to steal anything big from inside the houses, so they could come back multiple times. But after they got arrested last year, they realized they didn't enjoy being thieves anymore. And were just following their brother's lead, like they'd said before. Of course the kids were in trouble for not admitting any of that until then. And despite trying to keep it secret, word still got around somehow. It confirmed some of the suspicions of the neighbors. Considering how good my nephews were at being cat burglars, you'd think they'd have been more mindful of cameras. Or perhaps they just figured I would never get cameras. But after my nephews were exposed as thieves, a few of my and my sister's neighbors got cameras too. The punishment for admitting how they stole stuff was minor for my nephews. It was kinda redundant for the eldest because he's still in trouble with being on probation and whatnot. And he hadn't tried to steal anything else until he took the bottle of champagne. My brother-in-law started giving him lots of mint gum to chew to help with his cravings, because it was what he used to help cut back on drinking himself. And it kinda helped. Brother-in-law also started keeping all his booze locked in a padlocked fridge in the garage. He suspects his son tried to get into it once. All of that aside, things didn't seem so bad until my eldest nephew got in a fight at school in February. I'm told he didn't start it. But another kid picked on him until they started swinging fists. The nephew lost his two front teeth when he got his face slammed into a locker. There ended up being a reason for this attack. My younger nephews told me their older brother had a number of targets to pick on at school before getting arrested. He was apparently the typical bully people picture when they think of one. He stole things from other kids, aimed for the small and the weak, smacked them around when no one was looking, and on more than one occasion slashed bike tires. Well, the big brother of a kid he'd previously picked on went after him. And that boy messed him up. Both of his top front teeth were out, and his nose was broken. He had to be taken to the hospital, and an emergency surgeon had to put his teeth back in. Which also required special braces to hold them in place. His nose also had to be reset, and he was put in a neck brace. The poor boy didn't want to be seen by anyone for months. No one pressed charges. Believe me, I've asked many times as to why not. But the other kids' parents paid at least half of the cost for my nephew's treatments for his teeth and nose through their insurance. My sister and brother-in-law's health insurance sucked for covering the rest though, and they had a high copay. They didn't bother to file anything because they didn't want to be in court again, and the other parents only paid as much as they did because they didn't want to be sued. I contributed a bit to the cost too. I still had the $500 they'd given me in cash after I sued them, and decided to give it back to them to help ease the cost a little. When I saw my nephew after the incident, his face was messed up, and his front teeth were wired in place. He refused to return to school and did all his remaining lessons online with a school-provided laptop. The boy who hurt him, I was told, received nothing more than a 2-week suspension. I won't deny I was upset. But at the same time, I know this only happened because my nephew was a bully to other kids. What goes around, does still eventually come around. Today I fucked up by thinking divorce was an April Fool's gag. On April 1st, I got a group text from my wife Sarah's side of the family stating there was an emergency family meeting happening that night over dinner at my mother-in-law's house. I immediately had April Fool's spidey senses starting to tingle. I was excited to see what prank they had planned out, and we hadn't all got together since Christmas, so I said my wife and I were in. We were the last to arrive, and it was pretty somber when we walked in. We all sat down at the table, and my wife's brother Tim informed the family that his wife Ashley had been having an affair and they were divorcing. The affair was with a longtime close family friend Chris who lived a block away. Chris's wife Jen had caught them when she came home early one day last week and broke the news to Tim. Both families have been friends for years. They live less than a block from each other. They each have been married for more than 15 years, and each have 2 kids right around the same age. Honestly, I have always thought both of them were picture-perfect families. All 4 of them and their kids were at our house 2 weeks ago for a barbecue. After airing a lot of dirty laundry, their plans to divorce, how it could affect future family functions. Tim opened it up to the group with any questions, comments, and concerns. There was only silence. I broke the silence with laughter and a slow clap. Saying this was the best April Fool's gag I've ever seen, but I wasn't falling for it. I told Ashley and especially Tim they needed to consider going into acting. Their performances were top-notch, and their tears seemed genuine. It was honestly Oscar-worthy. Looking back in hindsight, this was not the best thing to say, especially for only being a part of the family for 6 months. I probably should not have said anything. Everyone in the room looked horrified. My mother-in-law, who had been crying the entire time, lost all composure. She left the room in hysterics and did not return before we left. Tim just shook his head, and his cheating wife actually let out a brief chuckle before calling me out for being a dumbass for thinking this was a ruse. Then berating me for being so insensitive. The rest of the family sat in silence, shaking their heads as my wife berated me for trying to make a joke out of a serious situation. Turns out their family never does any gag or prank for April Fools, like never ever. I wouldn't have known this since I was only in the family for 6 months and never spent an April with them yet. Should have just stayed silent. I barely talked for the rest of night besides apologizing. Everything was really awkward and my wife dragged me to leave the scene. I'm such a dumbass. My wife told me I needed to send a text to apologize again through text and I have no clue what to say. Help me out in the comments.
I caught my perfect fiancé having intimacy with an escort in our bed. Now, he's begging me not to terminate because it's his only chance of having biological kids. To my knowledge, my and my fiancé's relationship was perfect. He was a gentleman, a sweetheart, kind and genuine, all the things I ever wanted. But my ex-fiancé has little to almost no sperm. Not sure of the medical term, but his balls are too hot basically. My ex has always wanted to be a dad, that's been his dream since I met him, and when we both had fertility testing he was crushed learning about his infertility. He went on a pretty bad spiral briefly with alcohol that was hard to watch. A little over a week ago I started feeling pretty sick and nauseous. The possibility of being pregnant really didn't even enter my mind, but I took a test anyway and it came back positive, took another to be sure, and yeah, I'm pregnant. It hurts because I was genuinely so happy at the news, just being giddy and excited. Anyway, you can understand how excited I was to tell him all of this. I left work early and headed home. I tried phoning him but didn't get any answer. He was in our bed, effing an escort. I genuinely can't even explain the heartache I felt. Walking through the house, looking for him, and hearing them together, the absolutely disgusting things she was saying about me. Apparently she got off on the fact that he was cheating. I lost my shit, crying and yelling, dragged her out by her hair, and just started screaming at my ex. He was apologizing, saying he didn't mean to, that he was sorry, that it was just intimacy, and that he loved me. The effing cheater handbook. I was so angry and hurt. I really shouldn't have, but I just blurted out that I was pregnant and would be booking a visit to the clinic ASAP. He didn't believe me at first, so I threw my tests at him. He started crying a little, and then asked if I cheated. I told him it didn't matter either way because I'd be terminating it, and left. He's been messaging me constantly, showing up to my parents' place apologizing and begging for me not to terminate. It hurts because I wanted this baby too. It's not like it's an easy decision, but I can't keep it. I know that I'll always be tied to him for the rest of my life, and I refuse to let that happen. I'm grateful for my baby because they helped me find out about my ex cheating, but I just can't keep it. My ex has just been sleeping in his car outside of my parents' house. He caught me one time on the way to work, and he said that I don't even have to be in his life or the baby's, that I can sign away all parental rights, and to just please let him have this opportunity, but I mentally can't. I know that if I kept it I wouldn't be able to just give it away. I booked an appointment for next week, the earliest I can do it. So, Ada? I feel a bit morally conflicted, especially since this might be his only chance of having biological kids, which he desperately wants.
Am I the jerk for not forgiving my husband for a mistake and not trusting him with our child? I, 24, gave birth to my daughter 6 months ago and it should have been the happiest moment in my life. When my daughter was born her skin was very dark and looked like she could have 2 biological parents who were of African descent. My husband Jim, 26, fake name, was furious and accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened, made posts on social media and wanted a divorce. His family and a lot of our friend all called to say how upset they were at me and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time and I kept professing my innocence. Jim refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw my stuff out on the lawn and changed the locks, so I had to stay with my parents. When my sister called to ask for the baby stuff, Jim texted me pictures of the bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio. I like to paint, and the art I made, and told me my work would be too awful to sell. I was distraught and tried to focus on my baby. Weeks went by and Jim refused to speak to me directly and has never once asked about our child. Eventually he agreed to do a paternity and he was 100% the father. No one could believe the results and it was done again. Jim's the dad. Around that same time one of Jim's cousins did the ancestry thing and there was around 30% of African ancestry in the family. This combined with the test Jim's paternal great-grandmother admitted to having an affair around the time Jim's grandfather was born and was because he could pass, she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then Jim has been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize, and while it did feel good to feel vindicated, the damage has been done. I can't unhear or unsee all the horrible things that was said and done. Not just to me but to my child as well. Jim made some very racist remarks. Things that I thought he'd never say and he did it so easily. Regardless of what our daughter looks like, I don't want her to be around that. What else will Jim and his family say or do the next time they get mad? How are they going to treat our daughter when she does something that upsets them? Jim has been begging for forgiveness. I said I needed time. He asked to see the baby and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. He's repairing the nursery and keeps asking me what I would like, and I cry every time saying we already had what I liked and some of the items that we had can't be replaced. He asked me if I still loved him and I admitted that he showed me his worst self, and I don't know if I could live with that image. I didn't mean to be hurtful, but it's how I feel. My sister suggested couples therapy, but I don't feel like I should have to work to fix something that I didn't break. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent in all of this. The whole. Am I the jerk for not wanting to give Jim a second chance? I almost gave myself carbon monoxide poisoning, didn't notice the symptoms, and almost died. I worked as a maintenance guy, which means at times I gotta be there at odd hours to perform inspections with fire guys. I had a property that was about 60 miles away, and needed a fire alarm to go off at 5 a.m., prior to tenant arrival. It's the day before, about 5 p.m. I took my car, on the street in front of my house. The weather had recently shifted, so all my tires were reading warnings. It's a dual exhaust car, and it's running so that I can use this piece of poop compressor, think like a cheap Walmart cigarette lighter air pump, struggles to add 5 pounds per square inch. It's taking time, there's a light breeze, but it's only helping to push my car exhaust into my face. This whole time I've been near the pump and tire being inflated, so I spent a lot of time crouched, or sitting on the curb. I'll take this time to reiterate that this entire time, I said it was about 20 minutes, but I don't know for sure. Time got wonky. My car is running, and I can smell the exhaust. It stinks, but I'm outside. Tires after an eternity are good. I'm ready for my journey in the morning. I'll be leaving at 4 a.m. alarm set for 3. Finished the night unremarkable, conversed with my wife, got pity for having to wake up stupid early. The usual. So, I have already effed up. As of now in the story, nobody has a clue that I am walking dead. Alarm goes off at 3 a.m., I fumble with stopping it, and in my attempt to get out of bed I flat out fell, crushing a hamper. While I'm on the floor, my wife woke to that noise. All she hears is ow, and then I get up and stumble to the bathroom. She laughed off my stupidity and went back to sleep. I took a shower, and I felt like I was drunk as poop. Must just be tired. I'll shake it off when I start getting going. My memory of all of this gets spotty, so I am using what I was told as well just for context. Got in the car, backed out the driveway, ran over the trash can. Poop I. Must not be okay. Pulled back into the garage, closed the door, car off, all that. Trash can be left in the street on its side. Go inside, to bed, lay down, out like a light. Wife assumed that I called in sick when I came back in, surmised from the fall out of bed that I wasn't having a great morning. So a couple hours go by, she wakes up and leaves for her work. I am still just out. I've worked at this place now for about 5 years. I have a strong working relationship with my coworkers. We all know each other's spouses and kids' names. I get a text that somehow wakes me from sleep, and I manage to respond via text to my property manager. She read it and called me immediately. I wish I still had the text, but it was basically gibberish with autocorrect lending a hand, and she knew something was off. So she called me, I picked up and we spoke for a second or two, and then she hung up on me. So I'm like, she's mad or something, whatever, back to sleep. I just really want to sleep. By now it is probably around 9 a.m. My wife comes back home and tries to wake me up, not super effective. I got really spotty here, but she basically helped me to the car, and I remember her f***ing slamming gears. We both drove manuals and she was hammered down. I was calm, I just wanted to keep sleeping. I'm so tired. So effing tired. Got to ER, no wait for this guy. Straight to a room, oxygen covering my face, 4 in. They kept telling me I needed to stay awake, but sleep was right there. I dozed off so many times, I was being scolded by the doctors. I remember being confused, like what the F did I do, bro? Stop talking down to me. Just trying to take a little nap. I'm not sure exactly how severe it was, but based on the look on their faces, it didn't seem like a sure thing I'd be leaving out the same doors I came in. I remember being concerned, and so tired. So tired. This entire experience carves a gigantic black spot in my memory. I've had to piece it together from broken memory and accounts from my wife. I know had I not been taken to hospital I'd still be sleeping. I have my property manager to thank for calling my wife. She would have been gone for another 5 to 6 hours that day. I know I would have been in the bed still, with the broken hamper still under my side.
My entitled sister-in-law falsely accused me of cheating, so I exposed her dirty secret to the whole family. My sister-in-law and I have never got along, as she always seemed to look down on me due to my poor background growing up. The first time I met her, she found out that my family bounced from shelter to shelter when I was little and proceeded to tell me I should be grateful for finding a rich man even though I do not deserve one. This rubbed me completely the wrong way, but being a very non-confrontational person, I decided to let it go. But letting it go never worked. Every time I would see her, without fail, she would make comments about my poor upbringing, even stating on one occasion that my parents clearly didn't try hard enough at life, and that's why they were poor. That was the first time we got into an argument. I can let go of comments about me, but comments about my parents who gave up everything they had and are the greatest people I know. I couldn't tolerate that. This happened at a family event and we had a screaming match, which resulted in me leaving. Following this, I told my now husband that I do not want to see her anymore, that she brings me too much emotional stress, and that her entitled and golden child attitude is something I cannot handle. That was the first time my husband went into detail about his sister and stated she has always been this way. Coming from a rich family, she has always looked down on poorer people and flaunted their parents' money around. Her parents enabled this behavior too. My husband and his sister grew apart because of this, and to this day they are not all that close. At the time of the aforementioned event, my now husband and I were engaged, and we made the decision not to invite her to the wedding. There was screaming, there was fighting, there was outrage by my husband's family, but my husband stuck to his word and did not invite her. He had to cut contact with several family members due to the backlash he received over not inviting his sister to our wedding. This all happened 2 years ago and we stayed no contact with his sister until a year ago. She was the one to reach out and try to make contact. She texted my husband first, and when she did, he informed me of it immediately. Her text was actually one of an apology. She let him know that she was sorry for how she treated me through the years, and that she really misses her brother. And that she knows the only way to have him back is to apologize to me, and that is what she would like to do. When my husband showed me the text, I was apprehensive to say the least. I told him to give me a week to think about it, and I ultimately decided to give her one last chance. My husband asked me if I was sure and I said yes. So, he responded to her and once again opened up contact. His sister texted me the next day saying she wants to apologize but feels she should do it in person and asked to meet me for coffee. I told her I was not comfortable meeting face to face and that I will let her know when I am ready, and she seemed okay with it. Well, we met up around a month later. I was pleasantly surprised to see that she did indeed have an apology ready. She apologized for all the times that she was nasty to me and said she realized how entitled she acted. I accepted her apology but told her we will never be friends, just neutrals, and she seemed okay with it. We did not talk much, but we saw each other at family events and were respectful to each other, and that was enough for me. Well, that's how it was until about a week ago. I was at home, enjoying my day off work when my husband came home early looking super frustrated. I asked him what's wrong, and he asked for my phone without saying much. I gave it to him with no hesitation, which seemed to surprise him a little. He scrolled through for a minute, almost like he was looking for something. I asked him what was up and he told me not to say anything. He was on my phone for about 5 minutes all while I stared at him confused. He gave the phone back to me and sighed, asking if I have anything to admit to. I asked him what he meant, and he told me to talk. He then pulled up his phone and showed me a message he received from his sister. It was a screenshot of a Tinder profile, with my name and face, my location, a fully done-up profile. I stared in disbelief. He then showed me the message that his sister sent him accompanying the screenshot. The gist of it was that she recently realized she was bi and wanted to explore that side of her, so she went on Tinder and while scrolling came across my profile. I was shocked. After the past year of being friendly to me, after apologizing and reaching out, she backstabs me like this to get me away from her brother. My husband looked at me and told me to promise this isn't true. And I promised. I went through my app history with him. I did everything possible to show that this was not true. Thankfully, my husband ended up believing me. I pleaded to him that his sister was setting me up and we needed to confront her, and he agreed. He sent her a text saying he does not believe it, and that he needed further proof on the matter. She responded asking him how naive he could be if he needed more proof than this. This confirmed to him that she was indeed lying, as she had nothing else than a fake profile. I then took it upon myself to text her that she is a BTCH, a cold-hearted and evil woman who befriended me a year ago just to try to set me up with the world's most idiotic plan. I then blocked her. I thought that was it, but my husband then suggested getting one step ahead. She was obviously going to try to expose me to the whole family, and we should get there first. My husband then told me about his sister's darkest secret which we could use against her. The fact that there is a video out there, which my husband has, of his sister very drunk, taking a poop 5 feet away from a homeless man sleeping as her and her friends laugh while she's doing it. My husband suggested that he text her reminding her of this video, and that if she does not confess to lying about me cheating, he will share this video. That's what he did, and my sister confessed immediately. Her reasoning for doing so was that she thought I was still too low of a class for her family, and she could not stand seeing her brother with someone like me. My brother then screenshotted these texts and posted them in his family group chat, cropping out his messages and leaving in just her admission to what she did. The last week has been chaotic to say the least. I have had many family members on my husband's side call me to either show support or to give out. I'm trying not to let it get to me, but it's hard when half your husband's family think you don't deserve him.
What's the most unexpected encounter you've had with a wild animal? I've always been an outdoor enthusiast, and one of my favorite activities is hiking in the wilderness. A few years ago, I decided to take a solo trip to the Rocky Mountains. I was excited about the adventure and looked forward to the solitude. On the third day of my hike, I woke up early to break camp. As I was packing up, I noticed a large, dark figure moving in the distance. My heart skipped a beat as I realized it was a grizzly bear. The bear hadn't noticed me yet, so I slowly started to back away, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. Just as I was about to turn around, I stepped on a dry branch. The loud snap echoed through the quiet forest, and the bear's head shot up, its eyes locking onto me. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as the bear started to move towards me. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the forest, and a large elk charged out of the trees, ramming into the bear. The bear was taken by surprise and turned to face this new threat, giving me a chance to escape. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached another campsite. I alerted the park rangers about the bear, and they closed off the area for safety. That encounter was the most terrifying experience of my life. What is the creepiest family secret you have discovered? My mother's father came into my life when I was around 5. I was in my father's custody but had visitation with my mom's side every weekend, mostly with my mom and her mother. My mother had me very young, and at that age I had already known she was a heavy addict and had done bad things to me and in front of me. I still loved her, as she was my mom and I was just a kid. What I didn't understand was why I wasn't supposed to tell my dad that she'd been taking me to see her father. My dad was suspicious that I'd started saying stupid stuff that he'd been teaching me. Things along the lines of, "Daddy, I can't do that, I'm a girl, I'm too useless for that." Until I let it slip that I'd been seeing my maternal grandfather. My dad was pissed. All of my mom's family was pissed. I never knew why. Then, when I was 15 I learned that he came back into my life so suddenly because he had been in jail for 12 years. I had known he was an abusive father and husband and had forced my Nana into marrying him after he forced himself onto her, but didn't know that he went to jail because he had been cheating on my Nana with a 16-year-old babysitter, found out the babysitter had a boyfriend, and then confronted the boyfriend in front of the girl and took his life in front of her. I feel absolutely horrible for that girl and hope she's doing well and has gotten therapy for that. Now, he's a pastor, has custody of my younger brother, and constantly lectures me about how I'm going to hell for my romantic interests. For context, I've never killed anyone. I finessed him out of $400 and moved across the country. He's dying of some disease now. My sincerest wish is that when his time comes, he's alone and unloved. That man deserves nothing and I hate the person my little brother is becoming. He tried to keep my youngest sister from getting adopted by a loving, stable couple because they're both men. I called and told him that if he even so much as blinks in her direction, I'll let the cops know how many firearms he has. Baby sister is very happy with her dad's now, and I'm so relieved one of my mom's 6 goblins finally has a stable and loving home. I hope to meet her one day when she's older.
There are some guy secrets girls don't know about. Your chances of getting what you want out of us are infinitely higher if you tell us directly. When we want to be alone, it's not that we don't want to be around you, it's that we don't want to be around anyone for a bit. Oftentimes, we genuinely don't care where we go to eat because we're just hungry and want food. Any food. As long as you eat some too. Sometimes we use the stream of our pee to try and clean poop stains on the bottom of toilet bowls. Guys also like to be walked up to and asked out. It's not that we can't take hints, we are just afraid of looking too far into something. If someone is flirting with me I have the dilemma of is she actually into me or is this just how her personality is? I like hugs. If you want something to happen between us, you gotta meet us halfway. If we're not making a move, we are probably doing our best to not F it up.
My in-laws want my husband to cheat on me because they want a grandson. My husband and I have been together 5 years and we have twin girls together. We moved in before the pandemic after dating online for a year. During the time we were living down with his family they did everything in their power to try and get us to break up. I think it's because we have different colored skin but only 2 of them have flat out said it to me. Before I moved in with my husband, I told his family I am not a maid and my schooling will come first. All 12 of them agreed and so we moved in together. The first year of us living together, the pandemic started and we would have disagreements about stupid things, laundry not being picked up, toilet seat left up, pets needing to be cared for act. Whenever they heard us arguing even if we had both come up with a solution together they would interject into it and tell my husband I was wrong and he shouldn't have to compromise with someone of my kind. They would expect for me to clean up after everyone, including my husband's brother who peed in cups left pubic hair on the toilet, days after he blames me for getting an STD because that's what my kind does when I didn't have any contact besides passing by in the hall, and let his dogs pee and poop on the floor. Since I was a woman and should know what is expected of me. My husband's sister even came over when she knew he was going to be at school and threatened me and my family's life. She still tells people to this day that I tried getting my husband's dog, a 2-year-old male Rottweiler, to attack her which I like to think was holding him back since she had me cornered and I held him by the collar behind me. My husband says he was waiting for her to hit me because I don't know how to fight and wouldn't be able to actually hold him back. We got kicked out of that house and got our own place. We were planning on coming back to where I'm from to live with my family but it took longer than we expected. During that time I got pregnant and had extreme pregnancy nausea. We told them and the stress from them all made me miscarry and almost needed a blood transfusion. We moved in with my parents shortly after that and 3 months after the traumatic event I got pregnant again with twins. I again had the extreme pregnancy nausea and couldn't eat anything for 5 months. They weren't able to get accurate readings on both our girls and due to preeclampsia, they scheduled me to have a C-section as soon as possible. I talked to my doctor about getting sterilized and she agreed. Not even 24 hours after I had my C-section they were asking when we were going to try for a boy and even got mad at my husband for signing their birth certificate because my kind cheats. I told them we won't be having any more kids. They got mad but let it go and met our baby girls. 6 months later, I hear them tell my husband while he's on video call with them that I wasn't doing my womanly duties by not giving him a son and that he should go out and get another woman who's Mexican pregnant with a son to carry on the family name. He has told them no and even threatened to go no contact with them. It's now a year later and my husband's sister is still trying to pimp him out to her friends because they are Mexican and I'm white. We both have told them we can barely support the ones we have and don't want any more. My husband's family says they are up crying every night, dramatic much, because the family name is going to die out and I'm terrible for my husband because I'm denying him a chance to raise a son. So am I the a-hole? Update, My husband does stand up for me and I have been no contact with them for about 2 months now since they said that, and he was very upset they would say that in the first place. His words were, "You guys talk all this poop about dad and how he wasn't in our lives till child support ended, but you want to have his name carried on. Y'all are stupid. He only talks to them once every 6 months because they would send stuff for the girls, and most of the time they would call me to talk to him. Also, they are all the way in Texas and we are all the way up in Maine. They know where we live right now, but once we move to the new place we're going full no contact."
Try to extort a teen? Enjoy shitting your pants. Back in my youth I worked in the restaurant biz. I got my first job at the age of 13. It wasn't technically legal, but it was a summer job and I was making money and thus very happy. My mom was also very happy because I was out of the house and not spending only her money. The place I worked at was sketchy as F. It was a floating restaurant, built on a very popular tourist lake, surrounded by docks so tourist boaters could eat lunch without having to find a place to dock and walk to shore. As you can imagine, it was very popular. It was also owned solely by this old dude who was mean as hell to his staff, but also told the bartenders to let the teenage girls on staff get alcohol for free? Yeah. Gross. So as anyone who works in certain kinds of restaurants knows, rolling silverware sucks. One day we were rolling and I said, "Man, I wish we could just toss the rest of this silverware in the effing lake because my hands were so sore." Well, the next night when I wasn't there, someone actually did that. Then when everyone was trying to figure out who, everyone pointed at me since I'd said the thing the day before. Instead of approaching this like a regular human, the owner instead called me in his office and told me he knew it was me, he was going to fire me when he had proof, and sue me for the cost of hiring a diver to retrieve the silverware. I said, "So should I leave now?" He said, "It's up to you, but I'd hire a lawyer." As a kid I was scared. As an adult I know he probably did that trying to get a confession like some kinda SHT Columbo. On the other hand, I knew something he didn't know. My mom was a cop. At the same department he'd call if he actually had proof. I also knew he was violating child labor law, liquor law, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say with drunk teen waitresses closing every night, probably a few other things on top of that. So I did what any scared little boy does and called my mom. She wasn't at work yet, but she had to work that day. So she dressed for work and came over to talk to the owner. When the owner saw a uniformed police officer walk into the restaurant while he was sitting at the bar having a drink with a 16-year-old girl, he bolted to the bathroom. He was there for a bit. When he came out, my mom was standing there in uniform waiting. They exchanged a few words and then my mom smiled at me and left, and he also left. Came back 20 minutes later wearing different pants. He called me into the office and said, "Okay, so I'm convinced it wasn't you. You stuck around anyway. I like that. Let me bump your shifts around." I ended up on all the big tipper shifts after that, and the owner avoided me like the plague. The waitress he was drinking with later confirmed to me that he literally shat his pants when my mom walked in. She also told me she was the one who tossed the silverware because she tripped and it fell and she was afraid to say anything. Good times.
What made you quit a job on the spot? I used to cut grass in a cemetery. I used a push lawnmower and had to lift it up onto the elevated graves, and then back down and on to the next one, over and over and over. Minimum wage was $4.25 an hour. After an hour of cutting grass in the August heat, I sit down for my break, and this guy named Leroy asks, "Was that worth $4.25 to you?" I quit the next day, thanks Leroy. Walked into the interview, everything went well, accepted the job offer, went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount, and that I would be earning for the first month for $100 a week. I asked first about the amount difference, was told, "Oh, this the standard contract. It just hasn't been updated for your specific offer." I told them they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. "Oh, that's not how things work here." I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started, asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract, I was never an employee. Who boy, that was a fun call. R/mildly interesting. For more than 20 years, we've cored pineapples over this spot in the market. The drippings have dissolved enough of the concrete to expose the rebar. My mail person put 16 Burger King coupons in my mailbox. I found an unusual branch today. No plant nearby that looked even slightly similar. My pink spatula is permanently amber after scooping carrots out of a food processor. Vending machine at work made an error and distributed everything all at once. The ratio of strawberries to cereal in 2 boxes of Special K. The way this picture of a frozen puddle in my backyard looks like a landscape from the perspective of a plane. My dining room table houses a secret spiral staircase. This keypad randomizes the numbers every time so someone doesn't figure out the password from your hand movements. Chairs at my new job have rollerblade wheels so we can roll quietly.
I want to divorce my grieving wife because she won't get over her mother's death. She's making us all miserable. My wife's mother passed away 5 years ago from lung cancer. It was not a peaceful or easy death. Our lives understandably went on pause after the diagnosis, and we both spent a lot of time off work helping care for her mother. My wife had a pretty typical showing of grief at the time, cycling through different stages. Same with our 3 kids. After she passed, however, my wife got really bad. I totally understand this. I can't say I know exactly what she went through, because I haven't had a parent die, but I understand how devastated she was. For months after she could barely function. I gently took over pretty much all the responsibilities in the household and with the kids. She had been attending grief counseling since the diagnosis and continued after the death. None of this is the problem. I endeavored to be as supportive as possible. She cried on my shoulder every night for months and I just thought this was the worst of for better or worse. The problem is that after 5 years, she does not seem any better or more functional. She stopped grief counseling about 4 years ago and refused to go again, stating it would not help her and that nothing could. About a month before any major holiday, she will have a major downturn. In bed half the day, crying all day, does not want to interact with the family, does not have the energy to do anything around the house. This will go on every single day until about a week after the holiday ends. Every holiday is intense grief, just as much now as it was 5 years ago. October, November, December, and January, her mom's birthday month, every year are particularly bad. I am essentially without my wife, and am a single parent to my 3 kids. Altogether, she is completely incapacitated by grief for about 6 months out of the year, and has been the past 5 years. When I say incapacitated, I mean incapacitated. When she is in the depths of her grief, she is completely incapable of intimacy with me or the kids. There is no cuddling, spending time with us, going on family outings. I don't have intimacy for half the year. I've stopped asking her if she wants to talk about it because she can't get any words out between sobs if she tries. What hurts the most is that the kids have stopped asking or being concerned. If they see their mom in bed when they get home, they just go about their day and might casually mention, "Oh, mom is sad today," if they're siblings, or I ask where she is. They don't really seek affection with her anymore, because they rarely get anything more than tears. I've discussed this with therapists, my parents, friends, etc., and I know all the rebuttals people have for this, so let me preempt them. She is unwilling to go back to therapy for grief counseling or to see a doctor for depression. Yes, I know she's severely depressed. I can't force her to go to the doctor. I've tried so much. Yes, it really is just as intense as it was 5 years ago. No, I never tell her to get over it or blow her off. On my worst days I just give space and leave her be. Most days I try to offer her some comfort. If you want to judge me for leaving her alone, whatever, but know that I feel like I essentially have caretaker fatigue at this point. No, she does not have a history of depression, but she does have ADHD. Don't know if that's relevant. I feel like my wife died when her mom died. I would do anything to get her back, even a small piece of her, but she doesn't seem willing or able to move on past her mom's death. I feel awful for considering a divorce, but I don't know what else to do.